quorum. So I am going to call FINCOM to order. What time do I got here? 7:02? Right on time. Okay, thanks everybody again for being here. So I'm going to go through a quick agenda, and then we'll, it's pretty packed, so we'll go through this, hopefully be out of here before, we say, 11? Midnight?
Before the second forum?
Before the second forum, exactly. Yeah, hopefully, yeah, anyone bring a change of clothes. All right, so I'll go through the agenda. We're going to hear about the Killam School presentation from there, and then we're going to have a financial update from Sharon on just, all things financial, revenue, free cash, costs, budget for FY25. We'll also get a finance overview from Tom and Derek from the schools. I knew there was more. It looked too small on the first side of this page. Then we'll have a free cash discussion back with Sharon, and then we'll have a discussion and a presentation from around pickleball, kind of following on, I think, from Select Board, Rec. I think we're third in line, fifth in line. We're one of them in the line, and then the room will empty. And then we'll talk about future agendas, and we'll vote on meeting minutes. So good. That's where we're at. Just a quick, kind of set of introductions for folks around here. So Finance Committee, 9-person committee. Want to welcome. And we didn't even try this. We didn't even organize this. 2 new members to my left: John Sullivan, Andrew Kume. Welcome to your first forum. You're locked in now, boys. This is it. You can't leave now. Once you have one forum under your belt. So now we'll kind of just move over, and we have some individuals online. Actually, before we do so, let me just say, school committee. Does school committee need to call to order?
We quorum yet? No.
Select board. Now you do.
Select board, though,
Yeah.
right, please.
Yes.
I did it.
Oh, it's done. Okay, it's done. I didn't know if there's, I didn't see a gavel. I just, you never know how official you want to be. All right, so good. So we'll go from here and hit the first agenda item, which is a presentation around the Killam School project. I am going to introduce the chair of the Killam School Building Committee, Carla Nazaro, to kind of kick this off and with a discussion from Colliers.
There's nobody online. You're good.
Yeah, it's just the 3 of us from the the building committee.
Right, because those are all the people
Karen
on.
is online, you can, is that a quorum, or we 4?
No.
No, we're only 3.
3. Yeah, we're
Very
good.
good.
Great. Good evening. Thank you for having us here to do a quick presentation about the Killam Building Committee. I'm Carla Nazaro. I'm the chair of that committee. I am going to introduce Colliers, our owner's project manager, who we are delighted to have with us working on our project. They're going to do a brief presentation about the project. Just a couple of things about some of our recent meetings is the MSBA has proposed to us a couple of schedules for us to meet. There was a more aggressive schedule that the committee decided to push forward and achieve. So we are on a more aggressive schedule right now, which saves us or doesn't lose us 3 weeks. Last week from today, our request for proposal went out for our designer, so we will have a designer on board shortly. This Friday, we will do a site walkthrough with those designers. Applications will be due on October 11th, and then the building committee, or the design selection committee, which has 3 members from the district, will convene with the MSBA. Those 3 members will be Dr. Milichewski, Mr. Maltese and myself, and we will represent the district with the MSBA. And we will come to them with a short list of designers, and we will narrow it down and vote on a designer, and interview designers, and then ultimately vote on a designer. So it's exciting. So shortly, we will have a designer on board, and that's when all the fun begins and all the community involvement and different stakeholders' involvement. So we have 2 people online from Colliers who are going to do the presentation for us. So Mike Carroll is our project director, and Susanna Ewan is our project manager. So
Carl, thanks. So, Mike, just before you jump off, I just want to, again, thank Carla for the work of kind of starting to, we're now getting into the meat of it as far as the committee goes, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing as far as stepping up with Dr. Milichewski and Fidel on the design. I couldn't echo any louder what Carla said. We're really getting to the good part now. Once we start with the design, then it really kind of kicks off. So thank you so much for all your work. Sorry, Mike, you can go ahead now.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. We have a quick presentation here to share with you. This is a very similar presentation to what we actually saw with the school building committee when we first kicked off. And it's just a general overview of the general process here and what we're going to be doing and what you're going to be seeing over the next few months and years, and how we're going to get there, basically. So first and foremost, my name is Mike Carroll. I am with Colliers. I'm your project director. Colliers is going to be your owner's project manager, and we're going to be working hand in hand with you to manage this process from now until we get the students in the building and we get the financials closed out at the end. Above me is Derek Osman. He's the principal in charge. He's always there as a backstop. He's always there for support for us and always there for support for you as a community as well. Susanna Young is my project manager. She is here with me tonight, and she and I are the ones that are your primary points of contact, day to day. As we get the architect on board, she's going to be the one that's really managing the architect, and ultimately, as we get the contractors on board and things of that nature, she'll be working with them as well. And the last member of our team that I just want to mention is Tao Nguyen. So Tao is basically our project accountant on the project. She works on just about all of our MSBA projects. So she's going to be there to not only work on the projects, but and do the financials, but to help the district with the ProPay pay submissions so that you get your reimbursements back in a timely manner and make sure that goes as smoothly as possible. And she's a real benefit because, again, she does pretty much all of the MSBA projects that Colliers does. So she's very familiar with that process. And if you have any questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to jump in. Just to give you a general overview, again, I can get into this in more detail if we need to, but there's basically 9 modules, 9 different phases, if you will, in a process, in a project that you're doing with the MSBA. So the initial is the eligibility period, which you did prior to Colliers coming on. Currently, we're working on modules 2 through 4. Module 2 is forming the project team, and you've started with bringing us on, and now we're working with you to bring that designer on. And once we get that done, we'll be through that forming the team module, and we'll be moving into the feasibility and then the schematic design phases. And that's really what we're looking at over, say, the next 2 years. When people ask me what the feasibility is or what schematic design is, things of that nature, I'll often tell you, think of the feasibility as if you were trying to come up with an idea to put an addition on your home, and you're meeting with the contractor, and you might be meeting in a diner or in a restaurant or something, and literally on the back of a napkin you start sketching things out, right? It's what are the ideas? What do I want to do? What can I do? That's the feasibility. It's going through and kind of figuring out all the different options that you might want to look at, and do I want the addition to be on the left side of the house or the right side of the house? Do I want it to be big or small? All the different things, and those are the things that we're going to be doing. The designer is going to help lead that way. We're going to be talking with the educators. We're going to be talking with the community, and obviously with the leaders of that community, being yourselves and the building committee and the select board and everybody, trying to make sure that we're getting all parties' voices heard, so that we get a project that ultimately is going to be exciting for everybody, as exciting for everybody as it is for us and for the educators. Ultimately, what we will do through the end of that feasibility study is we will settle on one preferred option. We do have to submit that to the MSBA at the end of each of these phases. There's typically a submission to the MSBA to give them an update so that they can evaluate it and they can be on board with us moving into that next phase. So we will have that one preferred option at the end of feasibility. And from that point through the end of schematic design, we're really starting to develop that a little bit more, not getting the full details, but getting it to a point where we can actually do some reasonably confident estimates. The designer will do an estimate and Colliers will do an estimate for you to make sure that we're getting the numbers correct, because basically at the end of that schematic design phase, there's two major steps, and they're both really in that project funding module number 5. The first step of that is submitting it to the MSBA and getting the MSBA on board and getting to a point where we can sign a project funding agreement. And that's what's actually defining how much money the MSBA is going to be willing to participate in. And there's a lot of complicated formulas in there, but ultimately they'll give you a value that they're willing to participate on this based off of a percentage of the eligible costs. At that same time, you're going to be working together with your community to get your funding in place, whether it's a debt exclusion, an override, or an operational budget payment process. And I believe what we're going to be looking for a vote from the community is the initial discussion that we've had with that. Once we get that vote and we can secure the funding on our side and we can sign the agreement with the MSBA, we would move into that next phase, which is the detailed design and really finishing the design so that we can get out to construction and ultimately build your project. Project completion is actually getting the students into the building, making sure that the maintenance department understands how to build the building and sorry, not how to build, how to maintain the building, how the systems operate, things like that. New buildings come with newer modern technology, and we want to make sure that everybody understands the way to maintain that building and to operate that building at peak efficiency so that you can save money in the long run and you can have that building last for you as long as possible. Where the goal here is to have a minimum of a 50-year life expectancy on this building when we're done with it.
Hey, Mike,
yes.
can I just kind of interject and ask a question here? It's Ed on the Finance Committee. So you kind of hit on, and I know I'm kind of stealing maybe something from the schedule slide that's coming up, but you kind of mentioned that, that the yellow, kind of set of boxes together before we go to the funding side of that. Do we have that right, that it's, that's a process that's goes, kind of 20 to 24 months as you've kind of spelled out? And then I have a kind of follow-up just as it relates to that.
Yeah, sure. So let me jump in. So we had kind of two sets of documents here that we worked towards that 20 to 24 month. The first at the top of this slide here is basically what we got from the district in your initial RFP. The bottom is what we've actually looked at, what we feel based off of our initial discussions with you, what we think it would take, and they pretty much align. Your range was somewhere between 20 to 24 months. Right now, we're showing about 20.5. We feel that that's totally achievable, but again, it really kind of depends on you. We can move as fast or as slow as you want, basically, and that's one of the things that we've talked with the committee. And ultimately, what we've done is we've taken that and broken it down to a little bit more detail here. You can see basically lines 1 through 26 here is just basically the forming the team. Those are all the different activities it takes to get to that end of forming the team, which is actually signing the contract with the designer. Then we'd go through that feasibility and schematic, and right now we're targeting being at the end of schematic in basically January of 25. So that's that 20 and a half months. And then we've got the funding that goes out a little bit beyond that.
So Mike, just on that point, because we're kind of hitting kind of an inflection point as you get to funding, and this is just kind of something that I know we've talked about in our committee, but just for the kind of the wider audience here, I think would be helpful. Kind of leveraging your experience, how often and how much outreach should we expect as we try to as we kind of go out and kind of educate the town on the aspects of this as we start to get to that point where we're going to go to the voters?
So I would say you can't get out early enough and you can't get out often enough. So, the more information you can get out, an educated voter is a responsible voter, and that's really what we want. So typically, Colliers as the OPM, the designer, and even yourselves as public officials can provide information. We're not necessarily supposed to be asking people to vote yes or no, but we're providing that information. Oftentimes there are grassroots community groups that will get involved and may have a vote yes on Killam committee or something like that would actually work kind of in concert with that. They have the ability to ask us for documentation and information, and we can certainly provide that to them. But I would say the sooner that you can get out there, the better. Part of that feasibility and schematic design, we're going to be having community forums, and we're going to be meeting with the teachers and the staff and the educators, and we're going to be developing actually an educational program, which actually will help define what this building is going to need. We have to build a building, but before we build a building, we need to know what we need. What are the criteria that will make this building successful? And it's really that educational program, which is going to come from the superintendent and from the educators.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time to entertain that question.
So I think I was talking about the modules. The last module is basically closeout. One of the things that I will say that is a very big advantage with working with the MSBA is they hire a separate commissioning agent, which is separate from your OPM, separate from your designer and your contractor. They're kind of a second set of eyes. Oftentimes those commissioning agents are designers by trade. They might do design on one project and commissioning on another project, that type of thing. So they're very familiar with that design aspect, but they're there to make sure that the building that the designer designed actually gets built and that it's actually functioning properly. And they're there to help you make sure that you get the training you need. And then the last and maybe one of the most important aspects of their job is 11 months after the project ends, they're going to come back and interview people that are working in the building. They're going to reevaluate the systems to make sure things are working properly. What I equate that to is if you buy a new car and you have a 60,000 mile warranty, when you're at 59,000 miles, you bring it into the dealership and have it all checked over to make sure that something isn't going to die as soon as the warranty's up. So the building typically has a 1 year warranty, kind of a bumper to bumper warranty, if you will, on the whole building. So having the MSBA come back in at that 11th month mark is just another way to protect you and protect your investment and protect their investment. To make sure that everything is going good. When I do say your bumper to bumper warranty, there is that 1 year. There are many other systems that have longer warranties. Your roof might have a 20 or 30 year warranty. HVAC systems may have 10-year warranties, things like that. So don't feel that it's only a 1 year warranty, but it's that 1 year kind of, like I said, the equivalent of a bumper to bumper full warranty on everything in the building. So I'm looking at the schedule here. Basically, we are in that forming the team process here. We're actually, I think Carla mentioned that we've actually submitted the advertisement in the Central Register, which is line 16, kind of in the middle here. And then we've actually submitted the designer RFS for submission, and we're in that line 18 now. We're in that period. On Friday of this week, we're actually going to allow people to come in and tour the building and give them an opportunity to see where we're working right now and get an idea of why we need to have this project move forward. I will say that we've been kind of keeping track, and I think that there's been more than 60 requests for packages for those RFSs. I can't say every one of them is a design lead, if you will, an architect. There's many sub-consultants, maybe an HVAC sub-consultant or a civil. There's other professionals in the industry. We're actually one of them. We downloaded it just to make sure it worked. But so far, having 60 plus packages is a good sign for things to come here. So once we do get those packages in, again, Carla mentioned that we have a designer selection that we'll be doing that hand in hand with the MSBA. There will be 3 members from our community that will be part of that team. Colliers will be there in support of them, but really when we get to that point, It's the community members that are really going to end at the NSBA want to hear from. So we'll be working with them to make sure that they understand the RFPs. We're going to be doing interviews, sorry, not interviews, reference checks prior to the interviews to make sure that we have good references on all the designers. And if we have a bad reference, we'll be able to report that back to both you and the MSBA. And ultimately, the goal here is to have an initial review with the NSBA board. We will shortlist probably 3 designers. Sometimes it could be 4, depending on how close the scoring is. But typically, it's about 3, and then we will go back a second time to do the interviews with those 3, and we'll be expecting to come out of that second meeting with a preferred designer and work towards signing a contract with them, basically towards the end of November. Carla did mention that we had 2 schedule options, and we were looking at a slightly accelerated schedule versus maybe a slightly less accelerated, less aggressive. One of the advantages of having that accelerated is if things were to have a hiccup or a change, you can always have the fallback of the slightly less aggressive. But the other part of it is we're trying to get the contractor on before the end of the year, before we get into that Christmas holiday season where people might be on vacation and stuff like that, to really kind of get a jump start on this, so that we're hitting the ground running, right into the 2024 year. Then we will get into feasibility and schematic. I mentioned about those already, and then the funding. One of the things I will say is this is that same schedule, basically, just a little bit cleaner, just looking at the designer selection portion, and then boiling it down to even a little bit, the major milestones here. So applications are due to the district on the 11th, which is about 3 weeks away. We will then follow up with providing that information to the NSBA on the 19th, and then the designer selection panels that I mentioned earlier on the 7th and the 21st. Other than that, I'm open to questions or comments or anything that you've got. I just wanted to kind of give you a general overview. I can certainly get into more detail on anything that you need.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Anyone on the Finance Committee have any questions? Anybody in the audience have questions? You wowed him, Mike. No. Oh, actually, Tom's got one. Of course, Tom has to speak. Go ahead, Tom. You gotta go. You gotta go to lecture. You gotta walk.
Okay. First of all, Mike, thank you. Generally, when construction happens, do you have an idea, maybe this is a Sharon or Andrew question, when do we start paying the loans off or the bonds off? And so that I think about it from a financial planning perspective is if we do the construction in 25, 26, do we start in 27? Do we start in 28? When do we start paying that? When does the debt start to be paid off?
It's usually the following year from when we borrow, depending on what we're bringing.
Once construction completes or once we start the borrowing?
When we do the borrowing, when we start.
So the beginning of construction?
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. I think the other question, would be, sometimes you bond everything. Sometimes you do some temporary bans, or you do, bonds and partials. So all of that would be something we'll be working out over the course of the next couple of years.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Mary.
just thought of something. So when it gets to the point where you're going to the community to ask for money, and there's a window of time where, they're soliciting to have a debt exclusion override vote, for example, are communities allowed to have more than one if the first vote does not go? I mean, can they just do whatever is allowed within that window?
So there is typically a window, I believe, that you have to have the vote. If that vote were to fail, then you've got basically what happens is we're going to be going to the NSBA. They're going to be voting on the funding agreement. Once that vote has happened, we have to take action within 120 days. We can always ask for an extension. We can always have reviews of that nature, but typically that vote we usually try and time them so they're very close together, so that as soon as the MSBA gives us the green light, we get our funding in place and that we're allowed to continue to move forward, because we don't want to have a big, delay where we're not doing anything. We want to be able to keep the project moving. If the vote were to fail, one option is to re-vote it. I did work in a district in Webster, to be honest. They had a vote about a year ago. Initially, it failed. It did not fail by a lot. They did another vote 4 months later. They got more information out to the community, more community forums, things of that nature. And the second time it did pass. I will caution you that once the MSBA votes on we're going to get a preferred schematic at the end of feasibility, and then we're going to develop that preferred schematic, and we're going to submit that at the end of schematic design. Once they've voted on that schematic design and that budget, it's set. So if we were to have a second vote, it's not like we can change the building substantially, at least not without going back to the MSBA and having serious discussions with them. But they typically don't want you to be changing that building substantially after they voted for that funding agreement. So we can look at ad alternates, we can look at different options, how we present it, but ultimately the building that we present to the MSBA for sign off is really what we're going to be looking to vote on. Again, there's always adjustments to that. We're only, a third of the way through the design at that point. So there's going to be slight adjustments here and there, but it's not major changes after that.
That's what I was thinking of. If, say, the first design was something, and then you said, well, maybe some, and I'm not saying that would
In this
happen.
case, but you had something slightly more scaled back that, at a different price that might be different for the community. That's just where my thought was going. Thank you.
No, I have a community that I'm working with right now that they have an auditorium on a middle school, and the auditorium is non-reimbursable through the MSBA, so it's all town money, and they're worried that it might not pass the vote. And one of the thoughts was, well, if we don't pass the vote, we'll just cut the auditorium off and we'll redo it. But it's not as easy as that. Once the MSBA has voted on it, they've got that plan kind of locked in. So we've got to be prudent with our decisions.
Thanks, Marianne. Any other questions? Mike, Susanna, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to working more closely with you as the weeks and months move on. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's move on to the next agenda item. We'll look at toss it over to the town accountant, get some updates from a financial perspective from Sharon.
Thank you, Ed. I'm just going to look to share my screen, but I've got something right up here. Let me see it. Great. It's not at the beginning. Okay. So this is our agenda for tonight, and we've already heard about the Killam School presentation. So we're going to go through the revenue update, a free cash update. We're also going to look at fiscal 25 and beyond accommodated costs. Also the fiscal 25 operating budgets under different free cash scenarios. Then we're going to have an update from the school department, and then we're going to do a discussion regarding what kind of free cash we might be comfortable with for the fiscal 25 budget. And then we have a citizens petition related to the pickleball, the citizens petition for Burbank Ice Arena related to pickleball. And then we'll have agenda items and approve the minutes. So these are the fiscal 25 projections for revenue. Property taxes is 1.9 increase, which is deceptive and looks very low. And the reason it looks really low is because the excluded debt goes down by 52.4%. So in fiscal 24, we're paying off the last payment for the high school and for Wood End excluded debt. So the only debt payment that remains in fiscal 25 is the library, so one debt payment. So it just makes that percentage look deceptively low. Our baseline levy goes up 3.7%, which is calculated by taking your prior year levy, increasing it by 2.5%, and then adding in new growth. New growth seems to have slowed a little bit based on my conversations with the assessors, so we conservatively are going with a flat budget for new growth with no increase over prior year. As you can see, the 1.28 million is the final debt payment on the library project. And then the prior year, we had 3 debt exclusions, the Wood End, high school, and library. So it's a 52.4% decrease. And then we have a 2.5% increase for the abatements and exemptions. Other local revenues is up 11.2%. That might seem like a high percentage. However, within the local revenues, I'll show you at later slides, the biggest contributor there is investment income, which is drastically up over projection in the prior year. So we leveraged some of that in this fiscal 25 budget. State aid is up 2.5%, or that's what we projected at. That's the agreement we have with FINCOM, because when we're building our budgets, we never know what the state aid's going to be. So we set it at 2.5, and then FINCOM agrees that if it comes in lower and we need more free cash, they would support that use of free cash. And then the other is 1.8%. Most of the line items under other are flat. The only things that are increasing are indirect costs that we charge our enterprise funds, and RMLD's earnings distribution is up slightly. And then, of course, free cash is to be determined. So this slide shows us revenues with, the excluded debt backed out, just so you could see what the rate of increase. And you can see in fiscal 23, the rate of increase was 4%, in 24, 3.96, and then in fiscal 25, only 2.68. And you can see the free cash that we used over the last 2 years. And we have a to be determined, because that's why we do these financial forums, is for FinCom to chime in on what they think a good number would be there. So I did not fill that in. I just don't want to move like that. This is a 5-year analysis of our free cash, our certified free cash. The one thing I'll note is that fiscal 23 is not certified. It's an estimate calculated by me. There could be some deductions that DOR makes when I go to have it certified, but this is just to give us an idea where we're at. We started off the fiscal year with $19.93 million of free cash, and we regenerated in the revenue area 4.5 or just under $4.6 million of free cash, because our revenues came in over projection. And then expenses came in under projection, so we regenerated another $1.72 million there. We used a whopping $6.57 million last year, because we had done 3.28 for the operating budget for fiscal 24. We also had the $2.2 million that was for the Killam feasibility study. I want to say at November town meeting, we had about $300,000 that related to various things in the modifying that budget. Most of it had to do with the paying class study. We also had $414,000 that we had to move back to the Smart Growth Stabilization Fund. We typically do that at town meeting. In April last year, the money hadn't come in yet, and so it closed to free cash, so we had to move it from free cash. And then we had some various uses, a couple $100,000 in November. So it was a lot of free cash use, as you can see, a lot more than what's typical for us. You can see all the prior years. This is the highest number in the 5-year period. And then other adjustments to free cash, that's where we would have prior year money that was brought forward that's closed out to free cash if it's not used, or if we have grants in deficit at June 30th. It's almost as if they borrowed the money from the general fund, and so they get deducted. But we do get a little break there. If we get the money by September 30th, we don't have to deduct it. So this number is where there would be an adjustment. So that would be where it could vary. So we come up with a $19.32 million, which is about $600,000 less than last year. But given how much free cash we used, I think that's good news. So this slide shows you the source of the revenue over projection. Investment income came in $2.74 million over projection. Our new treasurer negotiated with banks as soon as interest rates started to go up and pitted banks against each other and got the best possible rate. So we got a lot of great revenue there. Property tax revenue coming in at $205. $205,000 above. Penalties and interest, $134,000 above projection. Meals, $111,000 above projection. And then payments in lieu of tax, $44,000. I also have something here just as a note. Motor vehicle excise is normally a source of, a big source of regeneration. In this particular case, it actually came in $30,000 under my projection. So I had to give that consideration when I was making the fiscal '25 projections. Delinquent taxes is an excessively high number for us. There's usually 100,000 or so there. That 738,000 includes 2 foreclosed properties that we auctioned. And so that's a number that's kind of a one-time thing that you might not expect in future years. Miscellaneous, 437, and Medicaid reimbursement, 65,000 over projection. And then we had some state aid, 55,000 over. So the green numbers are things that could potentially happen. They're mostly sustainable at 3.23 million. And then the ones that are black with the star, 1.29 million, those are more considered one-time payments. Some may reoccur, but it can't be expected at the level that we're looking at. For expenses, 1.72 million under budget, and this is the areas where the money came from. In the first section, that's accommodated cost at about 450,000, just under 100,000 from employee benefits, a little over 126 for capital expenses, FINCOM reserves at 190, snow and ice 23,000, and then street lighting at 14. The schools are turning back a little over 100,000 or 101,000. And then the bulk of it, about 750,000, is from the town's salaries. So that savings would be open positions, retirement savings. So when we built the budget, if somebody was at a higher pay and then they retired and we ended up taking on people that were less expensive, we have savings. And then various expense accounts brought in 426,000. This is our accommodated cost for the next 2 fiscal years, as well as looking at the current fiscal year. The change from fiscal '24 to fiscal '25 is deceivingly low. It says 2.10. And again, that excluded debt makes things look a little bit wonky. So benefits are up 5.8% over prior year. Capital and debt, again, that's where it looks like it's going down, but that's because our excluded debt is going down. Energy is up 11.9%. And I know in that category, we have a couple areas where there's double-digit growth. We had a contract for gas it's ending this year in May. It's going up over 30%. And then fuel is up, I think, about 15%. And then financials, 3.4%. And out-of-district special ed, we're projecting at 4%. And then another area where we've got a pretty big jump is vocational schools. The vocational school that's got a build going on, we're going to start seeing a capital add to our assessment for the vocational schools of about 200,000. So that's what's driving that 26.1 million. And then 2.3 for miscellaneous and community priorities. Within that community priorities, we have agreed with the school department to include $150,000 for full day K. And we'll continue to do that until we reach that goal of free full day K.
Sharon, just a quick question, and it's actually back a slide or two, but you don't necessarily have to go back to them, but just a question on projections for expenditures. So I know that, and I don't think you necessarily break out the expenditures kind of going back in time, but, like, again, some of these are estimates. They are estimates as far as what, so you want the expenditures to be, kind of turning back a negative number, but over time, and I'm interested in your thoughts on what we're doing going forward. Are we tampering our expectations as far as that goes? Just kind of what you were just talking about with some of the known increases that we're seeing around, energy and, other things that are out there. So have you kind of built that in, and how have you kind of built that in? I'm just out of curiosity. I think other folks would.
We have regular conversations about, as we start the process, we meet and have capital meetings to talk about what people's capital needs are. We also have meetings to discuss the accommodated costs, so the department heads who are dealing with any area of accommodated cost are asked to look at the number that I've come up with, because I start off by looking at what our history is, what actually has happened in prior years, and I'm going to come up with a number. But I might not know about everything that's going on in that industry. That department head, like such as facilities, might say to me, oh, Sharon, we just signed a contract for this gas and it's gone up. But I was actually part of that contract, but sometimes I don't know. So there's a lot of, obviously Fidelo's involved, there's a lot of communication with the department heads who are running the certain expenses to tell us, what's changing in the field that I need to be aware of. What contracts are we signing that might be a little bit more than I'm expecting? And so sometimes when I push those accommodated costs out to the departments, I get back, oh, that number needs to be bigger because this is happening. So that department head is a very key player in coming up with the budgets, especially for accommodated costs, and then also for the budgets within their departments as well. But historically, it feels like employee salaries on the town side is where we really turn back the most money on a consistent basis, and it's because it takes time to hire. Positions remain open for a long time. We had some very low salaries, so it was hard to attract talent. So that was the reason for kind of the non-union paying class study, to try and bring those salaries up so we could attract the talent that we needed. So positions remain open for an extended period. And also with fire, when we're looking for a firefighter, that's an extended period. Like, it takes a long time for them to go through the process. So we tend to have consistently turned back salaries, and that's not because we didn't need the people, it's because the positions remained open for a period of time, or we hired somebody cheaper because the person who retired was at the top of the range and you're hiring at the lower of the range. So there's a various amounts of things, but salaries consistently, we build our budget on the town side bottom up. We're building it by the person sitting in the seat. And if we know that person's retiring, then we put the steps going down. So we try to account for that, but we're doing this well in advance of the year, so things change. So you can't really do much to capture that.
So, and then on that, and Karen, I see your hand, I'll call you in 1 second, Karen. So conversely, on the revenue side, and I know you mentioned it when you were kind of talking about, the investment income. Just, again, historically, have you felt that you kind of went through the process on the expenditures? On the revenue side, kind of just, how does your feel, kind of as far as, what you've done in the past, and, and the confidence that you're, because I think typically and historically, we've been conservative, purposefully.
Mm-hmm.
And so has that evolved at all? Is it still kind of in the same, in the same boat? And are you and I think that's,
I'm not purposely going low, but we are conservative. That's what DOR expects of us. They don't want you to increase anything by 8 to 10%. Like, they will question and push back. So you really have to prove to them that you have seen these revenues, actual revenues coming in these categories, in order for them to approve it. So I really can't be overly optimistic. DOR just won't allow it. They'll just push back. We're pretty conservative. We try and go with a number that's very close to what we've seen in recent years. So what I usually start off with, this is a 5-year average of actuals, not projections, but actuals, and then look at the most recent year very seriously, and then consider anything that I know coming forward, changes in the economy, changes in the environment. So we would definitely want to look at all things and consider all things when we're building the budget. And so when we were looking at that revenue number of $2.4 million over projection, I didn't add $2.4 million to the revenue projection because I just don't know how long interest rates are going to stay that high. Did I increase it? Yeah, and I increased it a lot, but not nearly what it would be. It's going to come in at.
That's great, thanks. Karen, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Sharon, quick question. On this slide, the capital expenses, is that reflective of the earmark for the Grove Street parking lot, which we haven't undertaken yet?
Parking lot. I don't believe so. I believe a lot of that money has to do with the I think it's $150,000 we give for the building committee to do studies if they need to. So I feel like that money is what's in there. I don't think it has anything to do with that.
So that parking lot is a capital project or no?
It would be a capital.
project, but this is money in the general fund, so if you've got an earmark, it's a grant, so that would be outside of the operating budget.
Okay, is there a separate, so part of my question is wondering, we were unable to get it completed in the same year that we received the monies. So I was wondering, where does that go? Or where did it go?
We set up a grant, so we
It away from the general fund entirely. So we set up a multi-year fund where the revenue would go, and then we continue on, even though it crosses 2 fiscal years, we're able to continue to do the work because the money is still there. Whereas the general fund at the end of the fiscal year, everything closes out to free cash. That wouldn't happen to that money because it was an earmark grant.
Yeah, okay. Are we doing that for like every major grant that's coming in?
every earmark.
Yes, every major grant pretty much is in its own fund, so it doesn't get mixed in.
Very good, excellent. And then I just had a question. I couldn't hear you when you were going over the energy category and you mentioned one contract went up 30%. I just couldn't hear what it was, and I was wondering if you could.
It was
It was the gas contract.
It was a gas contract going up 30%.
We had talked about it last year because we had bumped up last year to try and smooth out this year, and we ended up bringing it back down and using it to help with, full day K last year.
I thought I also heard you say a gas contract went up 15%, so that's just indicated.
So that would be
For
fuel.
vehicles, so gas prices continue to rise, and so we have, I believe it's 15% that's in our budget for an increase for fuel for cars.
Okay, so 15% more for gas-powered vehicles or diesel or what have you, and
Yeah.
30% for heating our gas-powered municipal buildings.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions where we're at now? Otherwise, we'll let Sharon keep on trucking.
I have one question on the new.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So a few meetings ago, we had a presentation from Andrew on the MBTA communities. And if for some reason that passes in the town of Reading, do you see any changes on that number, the new growth? Because
And it's conservative when we start our budget with new growth, because what happens is in November, our assessor will get it certified, and then we tend to use that money in November if it's more than what we project. So seeing that this year looks like it might come in lower than what I've projected, we went flat with it because we're just not sure. Things have slowed. Okay. So this is benefits, which is an accommodated cost in detail to show you kind of what the key players are that are driving the increases there. Retirement being one of the bigger ones. Every 2 years, our pension assessment is, every 2 years, Retirement Board will do evaluation to get a funding schedule to fully fund the liability. So every 2 years, that number stands to go up. And in this case, in order for us to stay on a fully funded timeline of 2031, they're increasing our assessment by 8.3%. And then OPEB, we're leaving flat at 500,000, but health insurance is up 5%. And what we tend to do with health insurance and OPEB is we kind of use OPEB as a hedge. We do not put the money into the OPEB trust until after April town meeting, during that meeting, so that we can see how health insurance comes up. Because when we're building our budget, we don't know what enrollment is, we don't know what our rates of increase is going to be. And so that 500,000 may be needed if things are drastically higher than we anticipate. And so we know that at April town meeting, and we will decide what we're going to put into OPEB, but we almost always try to do at least 500,000. We did bring it back during the pandemic to lower levels, and we've returned to 500,000. But with so many accommodated costs going up double-digit percentages, we are just not able to increase the OPEB. But the plan is for the OPEB to be more fully funded when we get to our fully funded for retirement. We would start to redirect more funding there. The 500,000 doesn't even scratch the surface of what really needs to be funded every year to do a funding schedule of 30 years. So we would want to get to 2031, get our retirement fully funded so that we could start to redirect funding. But it's important to note that the OPEB money that we fund can be used for health insurance if we're wrong about our projection. But what typically you'll see is that we'll move more into OPEB because we might have savings in health insurance. So sometimes health insurance comes in lower, and you might see us put in $800,000 to OPEB. So just to understand that we try to use that as a hedge so that we don't have to go with double-digit numbers necessarily for health insurance when it comes to the percentage.
Hey, Sharon,
Yep.
just for the new guy, what is OPEB?
Other post-employment benefits, which is health insurance and retirement. Yep.
Thank you.
And then on both the retirement and OPEB, we're, as it relates to other communities,
We're doing well.
We're doing well.
Yeah.
I think that's important. People hear those numbers of 2031 and things not, but we're ahead of the game.
The other one distinction that I wanted to make is that retirement is mandated by law. Once you fund it, you have to maintain it. OPEB, on the other side, there is no mandation. You don't have to fund.
Which is
you
why
don't have
we're
to
able
fund
to,
OPEB. That's
yeah.
why they use it as a hedge, but it's been working great.
And then the other big piece is capital and debt. You can see that it looks like it's going down 12.8%, but again, you can see that 52.4% reduction in the excluded debt, which is what drives that number to look so negative. But we are still keeping with, you can see pretty consistent numbers from year to year for capital, pretty consistent with fiscal '24 at 2.938, we're up to 3.03 million. And then debt inside the levy is very similar number, just up 4%. So it's really that 52.4% for excluded debt that makes that look so drastically low. So this slide will show us what we would need to use for free cash to get certain levels of an operating budget. And what this slide shows is the total amount of free cash on the left-hand column, and then how much for the operating budget. And then we had agreed that fiscal '25 would be the last year that we would add an additional $700,000 for capital because capital costs have gone up so drastically. So you can see here for 3.15 million, 2.45 would be for the operating budget and 700,000 would be for capital, and that would only get us a 2.5% operating budget. 3.33 would get us a 2.75% operating budget. 3.52 would give us a 3% operating budget. 3.7 million would get us a 3.25 operating budget. 3,089,000 would be 3.5. Just over 4.08 would give us 3.75, and 4% would be 4.26, and then 4.45 for 4.25%. So the numbers are pretty high. But it's important to note that not all the free cash needed would be used for the operating budget, but for capital, which is going to have cost.
By the way, I really super appreciate this slide. This chart is, I think we've done this in different, I don't think I've seen it just quite this way. And in the past, I think we've done them just kind of in our meetings, but this is really helpful. I mean, this is something that's, very pertinent to what, and I think it's good just for all of us to kind of see it in that what supports operating and what we've kind of agreed that we're going to do for capital. Having that, those distinct columns is, I think, is really helpful, and knowing what that relationship and how it looks on the back end is really helpful.
And this is where you guys will have to decide. I don't know if you planned on you'll have a discussion about this tonight, but I don't know when you plan to decide, but that's the numbers that you want to kind of be looking at.
Yeah, no, I think that's, so Sharon, is that your last one?
Yes.
It is your last one on this one? And so,
Well, I do have a slide there that's just for you, but to wrap up.
okay. All right, so then, actually, something, why don't we take, kind of, I know, so next, right after you, we're gonna hit to Tom and Derek, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you can skip over that one. Actually, if you can go back to your, not my stupid slide, but the one before that on the
free cash.
On the free cash usage, because I know that's something that we've kind of talked about. We kind of glossed over this. Yeah, it's the one before that, if you can.
Yeah, it's not letting me go back. 1 second.
Yeah, no rush. But so I know that's something that we've kind of talked about on our end, and again, this is probably, we have another forum coming up on the 20th.
25th?
25th of October. This one's the one that's on the 20th.
We have a meeting on the 11th, I think.
And our next financial forum.
Is October 25th.
And then we have a meeting in between where we're going to vote on articles, right?
Correct.
Gotcha, okay. Which is on this slide that Sharon actually had up. Yeah, maybe we did, maybe I did need that slide. So I, again, I know we talked about this piece of it, and again, I know that, we're kind of resolute on the use of free cash for extra capital, but in light of, kind of discussions and things that have been happening, again, some of the costs that, that Sharon's alluded to, some of the other costs that we know that we're anticipating. I think this is, kind of inflationary pressures that are out there. I think this is, kind of one of those times when we may want to lean into this one a little bit more versus other years where I think we've been more in the, in the 3%, range at the end of the day to the increase to the operating budgets. And again, I'm interested in, kind of other, discussion and viewpoints from the rest of the committee, but I'm more of the mind that we would be, closer to the, 3.89 or $4 million, support for both operating and cash, given, some of the things that have been identified. But again, it's not something we're going to vote on today, but interested in hear if anyone else has any, kind of thoughts or around that. But, yeah, we'll start with Mary Ann and we'll go to Emily.
Just one of my questions related to going in that direction, I probably should have asked. Going back to one of your slides about how you said investment income is coming in higher at 2.74 million, and you said that was mostly sustainable, so are we expecting that to lock in good rates, or are we expecting that level for the next couple of years?
I don't expect interest rates to go down dramatically, but we did not project 2.74 million in our fiscal 25 budget. I think I went with like a $1 million number.
Okay.
So, I mean, not even half of what we saw did I use in the fiscal 25 budget. So we have room for it to go down and we would still be safe.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Emily.
That was actually my first question.
Okay.
My second
Great minds think alike.
My second question, I only have my notes from the last meeting. Can we remind me or us where we landed last fiscal year on guidance for free cash?
Well, how much we used?
Yeah, how much did we use?
$3.28 million was used last year.
Should be good, Joe.
But again, 700,000 was for,
Right.
was for capital.
So 3.28 was the all-in number.
All-in number.
Gotcha, okay, that's good.
Ed, do we have anything that breaks out the use of free cash for operating budget, where that would be allocated to?
No, I don't, yeah, we don't, I think that's, once we set it, are you asking like what happened last year and other years as far as that? How
Do
that
we
goes?
have a projection of where that would go to, these budgets?
It's a little bit where the sausage is made, isn't it? I don't know if we get into that.
The 1/3, 2/3 town school, school-town split, isn't that?
I think it's around the arm wrestling, right? Is it?
No,
I'm not sure I
The ratio
understand the
of
question.
assets.
I didn't hear the question.
So I think I hear about like, what is this going to fund, right? And
Right.
essentially, it's we build the budget once we know the revenue. It's not one line of like free cash is going to fund this in particular. It funds the overall budget.
And the 700,000 goes towards the capital that we have planned. So for anybody who's new, part of our budget process is 5% of our budget goes to debt and capital. So when we're starting off this process, we look at what we have for debt payments for that year. We calculate 5% of our revenues, and we back out the debt service, and that is our capital number. In this instance, we're adding 700,000 to that number because the cost had gone up so dramatically, and it was going to slow some of the things we had on our capital plan. So this is the last year we're planning to do that. We do have a capital plan that we have in balance right now, and you will see it as we start to wrap the budget up. But that will have all sorts of things, including, I think, a fire engine in fiscal 25. So we try and get as much into the capital plan using that 5% and borrow as little as possible. because we don't want to pay the interest rates, especially now at this higher interest rate.
Yep. You know, the follow-up.
Yeah,
Go
so
for it.
the increase over, the operating budget is versus the last year's budget, right?
Yes.
So it's not the actual. So some of these shortfalls in expenses that you mentioned, so, you know, are those areas going to get allocated additional budget, or is that up to you, Fidel, how to split this? Because I know there's areas that are going to need more budget dollars than, you know, is.
You mean in terms of how it gets allocated
Yeah.
back to the departments?
Yeah.
We tend to kind of go, every department head's told to build their budget based on whatever FinCom tells us the operating budget is going to be. And then sometimes you'll have departments that will come in lower and others that are requesting something that comes in higher, and then it's up to us to balance it. So off the cuff, I don't know which departments that would be, but you do tend to find in areas, especially when you have unions and such, when people are at top step, they don't necessarily overall hit that number that we might be at because they've got a contract in place. So sometimes there's savings and salaries in certain departments that can help another department that has needs that are, you know, extraordinary for that year. So it doesn't necessarily, I mean, when we start our budget process, the department heads are trying to stay within whatever the operating budget percentage is. So if we were saying 3.25, they would go to the drawing board and trying to build their budget with 3.25. And then you're going to have some people saying, I can't do it, I've got a little bit extra, and then others that will say we're a little under, and that we balance it that way. Am I not answering your question?
So it's sort of the chicken and the egg then, you know, where, how do we tell you what amount you need if you can't tell us what you're going to need?
I mean, we know what salaries would need to be, but in terms of, I mean, a typical operating budget is at least 3%. We typically try and stay at least at 3%, but we've done less in the past. So we usually build our budget around what that operating budget number is that you guys think is affordable with the free cash use.
Yeah, and again, my take on it is, given some of the things that have been identified, you know, as far as additional expenses and, you know, inflation, things of that nature, you know, everything's, you know, kind of, there are certain line items that are just, you know, on an upward trend, that, you know, at least for, you know, and also knowing that we'll, you know, maybe, you know, we're scheduled to use less free cash for capital, whether that, you know, we'll figure out FY '26 when we get to FY '26. But, you know, kind of given some of that's another, you know, kind of thought process to be able to address some of the other concerns and you know, other, you know, kind of activities that we anticipate in FY '25.
Can I say something else?
Of course.
That might be clarifying.
You don't ever have to ask permission, Sharon. I think that goes without saying.
So when we're building the budget, we project our revenues first and then the accommodated costs. These percentages are after we've taken the accommodated costs off the top. So that would include debt and capital, out-of-district special ed, all the things that we consider to be accommodated cost benefits. All of that has been taken off, and then this is what free cash will do for us when we split the money between the town and the school. So these numbers are with the accommodated cost already taken away from the projected revenues that we have, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. It's really good. On the operating side, though, similar to Mark's question, are there any known surprises? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The
If it's known,
inflationary
Joe,
pressure
I don't know. If it's known, I don't know if it's a surprise.
I should rephrase that, but any surprises or things that we're watching that I could see the inflationary pressure on the capital side, right? But I'm just on the operating side.
I feel like there a lot of the things that I know of are in the accommodated cost area, but just the inflation environment, everything is costing us more. So it's hard to know. It's just hard to know what else is going to come when we're building our budgets, when the department heads try and put it together and say, well, I know that this is costing me a lot more than it used to. The bigger things, the things that we know of, are capital and benefits and things of that nature, and those are
Maybe
accommodated
energy
cost.
costs,
Yeah,
right,
but
so-
also too, I mean, salaries, retention of our employees has been a real issue. And so, you don't want to go with such a low number that we can't give raises that will retain our staff,
Yeah,
because
and
they can go
I'm not
elsewhere.
suggesting that, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
understand.
no, but so those are the kind of challenges that we're faced with. It's like trying to get it to an operating budget that gives people with a decent, increase each year, and also cover all the other expenses. And everything is costing more in this environment. It's a very hard budget to balance.
And just for something on the school side too, which I know we've had conversation just in some of the towns, just the expiring contracts, so all 5 of our bargaining units expiring at the end of the fiscal year too. So that's just something on our radar, and something we know that we have some spots where we have to make up some ground as well too. So I think that may be sort of one of those surprise or unexpected numbers too, that just may be unique for us this year as well.
Absolutely. On the town side, all of the unions were negotiating their contracts. So we have unknowns on the salary side for sure.
Ed, may I say?
Of course, yeah. Please.
So the way that municipal finance works, usually for the operating budget, on the town side, everything is voted on a line item. So think of it as you're giving a little relief into that line item for a department head to make a call on something that they would like to do. Usually, the lower the operating budget, the lower they will cut, and they're just going to be more restricted. Compared to the school side, which is a little different. The school side is just one line item. But on the town side, this relief, this support from the free cash, it makes a difference sometimes for a department head, depending on where we land. But I do support you at that. I'm probably looking at that to 3.7, or the 3.8 to 4.
Any other questions before we, Karen is here?
Karen has one.
Before we call Karen, and then we can put the free cash discussion to bed for a while. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, just to make sure I understand this chart we're looking at. Increased operating budgets, is that exclusive of the 700,000 that we were allocating to capital? That's
Yes.
just an operating, thank you.
It's just
It
break.
down so that you can see how much is going to capital and how much is going to increase the operating budget.
Okay, I was too lazy to do the math. Okay, so Ed, you were suggesting 3.89, or sorry, yeah, 3.89 versus 4.08 to be considered, I think, and then, and this, we've already decided, we will be adding 700, additional capital, 700,000 additional capital this year? Is that just to confirm what I heard?
Yes.
Yes, we discussed it last year. Yep.
Okay, then my only other question, just for a reference point, I don't have all this in front of me. What was our percentage last year? Does anyone remember?
Percentage
Increase?
for the operating budgets ended up being 4% because
We ended up reducing late accommodated cost, if you remember.
I do remember a 4 number, and I just wanted to be sure about that. And were the town and the schools the same percentage, or were they different?
The same.
Okay, so it was exactly 4 or over 4?
I think it was
Under 4, but we went with, 4% as just a round up. It was like 3.99 something, so it was like 4%.
Okay, that's helpful. So that would be more of a 4.26. Okay, thank you very much. And I don't have an answer for you yet.
Trying to follow up on the answer to that question. So there was a unique sequence of events last year where we actually voted on a 3.25%, I believe, support, which then was based, but the number that we did that on was based on a very pessimistic projection of accommodated costs, which in turn was based on assuming significantly higher utility costs than we actually had. And then later, when it became clear that that was a ridiculous overestimate, things got moved around and it turned into a 4%. It was the same absolute number of dollars of free cash that had been 3.25% operating budget increase before and was now, or 3.25% operating budget support before, and was 4% operating budget after
I think it was 3.65 or 3.75 we started off with, and then when we made that adjustment, it went up to 4.
Was it that high?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty remarkable. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Great. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Okay, I mean, given that last year's budget increase to the operating budget was in the 3.65 to 4%, somewhere in there, and we're seeing much more inflationary pressure for this year, I would say we should definitely be looking at the higher range, the 4.08 million, or even up to 4.26, to get that same 4% that we ended up with for last year, just because we're seeing much more inflationary pressure on the budget. And the free cash is in great shape.
Go ahead, Joe.
So one aspect of the free cash discussion I don't think the free cash discussion would be complete without projecting what a given use gives us in the future. So I actually haven't harassed Sharon for a new spreadsheet, but I used the same spreadsheet from last year and plugged in some of these numbers, including the 4.08 number and the 4.26 number even, actually. And it's still, it's still keeping us above our 7% reserve target, for the spreadsheet only ends in 2031. It's provided I need to get a newer spreadsheet, so it goes further. But we're still in the green or in the black, depending on your color coding in your spreadsheet, for 8 years on the spreadsheet and probably longer. But
And I think the spreadsheet might have a low regeneration estimate.
yes, I think we talked about this
2.5.
last year. I had a less conservative regeneration estimate than you, because I don't think it'd be possible to have a more conservative regeneration estimate than you. But it was still based on half the average of the last 10 years.
Yeah, it was like,
Is
the
what I
average
was
over the last 10
projecting.
years is like $4 million.
Yeah, the average, it's higher, actually. So half the average of the last 10 years came out to like, 3
But we're
roughly.
actually adding in the 6.
It does something to the average, doesn't it?
It does, I'm
So,
sure.
yes.
I don't think I provided that yet, so I
Not
can
yet,
definitely
no.
do
So,
that.
Joe, even on yours, do you have any kind of like one-time stuff that you, like, kind of from a capital perspective that you have in that? I know we've had different versions of them, just looking at the one that you have now.
So I think I looked at the warrant for the draft warrant for November and put in a number based on how much free cash we're talking about using there.
But just for the 1 year, right? Nothing in.
Yes, yeah.
Nothing in the out years. Good, Tom. Yeah, only you. No one else has to do that.
We don't care.
I noticed that our town manager and superintendent didn't have to do it.
Fidel said, but yeah, no, you're right.
Tom Wise, School Committee, 181 South Street. Joe, have you, and maybe Sharon, in that model, does it account for money coming back from MSBA as a result of the Killam 2.2 million that we already took out? When we get the 40% back of that 2.2 million, that goes into free
We took
cash,
that out
right?
of free cash so that it doesn't have that anywhere accounted for money coming back from the MSBA.
Right, so that's another 800,000 that could go back into the free cash when that money comes back. Hopefully, if we hit that number, give or take.
Yep, that's awesome. Thanks, Tom. Go ahead, Mark.
You said I didn't have.
No, I said Fidel.
I was going to hold you to that.
No, I know. I strive to be inconsistent.
Yeah, thank you. So Mark Doxer from the Select Board. So two things I think we want to keep in mind also. One is, and Ed, to your kind of initial comment when the meeting started, free cash at the level that it's at may be some great opportunities for capital projects. And the town really is hungry for some really interesting projects right now. So I'd just make sure that we're balancing kind of how high we may go here with what we really want to do with capital projects and not feel like, oh my gosh, we have all this money, we can keep supporting the operating budget really strongly. The other thing is that one of the reasons why we're looking to pull so hard out of free cash this time is because new growth stalled. And I think we need to talk about that with town meeting, because part of it probably relates to some of the desires for density that town meeting voted in to decrease the density. Made a lot of projects that were potentially going to take place kind of stop. And so if the new world is going to be like that, we're not going to have that kind of new growth, that means we are going to need to pull harder on free cash. And I just would caution us to make sure we don't kind of climb the ladder too high. Understood on inflationary pressures and things like that, but I'm trying to remember if we had numbers above 4% operating budget decreases in recent memory, and I can't think of any. I think that's kind of on the high, getting to the high end of it.
It's on the high end.
Yeah,
Yep.
cool, thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
After all the stuff that's put back in through town meeting, right?
Any other questions from anybody? Awesome. Sharon, again, thank you so much for all this stuff, and all of the stuff that you do to educate us. Appreciate it, and all the other work that you do. All right, so I think we're at the stage now where we're going to hear from the schools. Am I right? I have that right?
And Ed, are we voting that, the
Not tonight.
number next time, or?
We do that on the 11th?
On the 11th, yeah.
We're going to do that on the 11th.
Give you some time to think about it.
And the warrant?
I thought we did it on the other financial forum.
Well, we'll start on the 11th, and if it carries over, we'll do it on the 25th. Go ahead, guys. They're just gonna keep on asking me those questions. I
just
can't
want me
answer.
to get
Yeah, just come on over.
Okay.
Please.
Hi, everyone. For those that haven't met, I'm Tom Milczewski. I'm the superintendent of schools. Tonight, the schools are represented by a few of our school committee members here, too. Carla, Tom, Aaron, and also I'm up here tonight to just give you a heads up. This will be a brief, high-level overview presentation, given we're so early in the budget process. I most importantly just want to introduce our new Director of Finance and Operations. I know many in the community have not had the chance to meet Dr. Derek Pinto yet. Dr. Pinto is just in his second month now, so this is still sort of new to him. Dr. Pinto has been a CFO of a public school district in California, and most recently was the Vice President of Finance and Administration at LaSalle University, too. So thrilled to have Derek joining our team, and I'm sure they'll be seeing him at many of these presentations the years to come. So Derek will walk us through our 4-slide presentation, and then anyone here on our team is happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think Jackie has the slides to
Yep. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you again. Thanks. Nice to see you again. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Milczewski. So I've got a few short slides that'll come up any second now. And so, as Dr. Milczewski mentioned, I'm now closing out my second month in the district. It's been quite a whirlwind. This is I'm here to present just a few items on the school finance overview for fiscal year 25. This is just going to be brief, as we mentioned, and these are just offering a little preview of some of the things that are on my radar. This is kind of the usual content and format for this stage of the process, and of course I'll have flesh out some more details going forward. So this slide here, we're looking at just a few goals and objectives. Our budget development process will be kind of a multi-year vision that we're offering, and I'm just going to finish with a quick snapshot of the budget calendar. Okay, so I'm ready to go to the next one. So what I'm going to do is I'll just hit 1 or 2 points per slide because the slides are in the packet. You'll have the opportunity to review them at your leisure. Of course, we're always open for questions and readily available. The 3 points I want to hit on this particular slide that has to do with our budget goals. So we're definitely going to commit to creating a sense of belonging for our students and staff, and we're delivering rigorous instruction. So those are things that a couple of things that we're committed to, along with maximizing our resources. So this is something that's very important to us, strategies and programs that we're going to be employing or implementing to produce big gains. So this is always the challenge, right? School business leveraging every dollar to the best advantage of our students, and so we're certainly aiming to do that. As Dr. Milczewski mentioned a little bit earlier, the big thing is the last bullet on this slide, which has to do with meeting contractual obligations for our 5 bargaining units. So we've already begun meetings, with an eye to the future. The contracts are ending at the end of fiscal year 24. So we started our meetings with the Teachers Association in June, have met with secretaries in September, and we'll be meeting with the balance of bargaining units as we go forward through the year. And that'll be happening, shortly. We're aiming to meet before December. I'll go to the next one, has to do with our multi-year vision. So of course in this one we're looking at the fiscal year 23 end-of-year status, so I'll be presenting on that shortly to school committee. We're also looking at our current year projected expenses and seeing that we're on track along with our fund balances. As I mentioned just a minute ago, maximizing our source of funding while managing expenses is going to be very important to us. So we're looking for sources of revenue all the time, things like grant writing. We're looking at our revolving funds. We're looking at special revenues. And then, of course, expenditures are important. So controlling those expenditures, whether it's reviewing vendor contracts, heightening any efficiencies that we can. And then, of course, we're going to engage our stakeholders in doing this. So we'd like to get input from all of our stakeholders on what our priorities are, and then take action on that. And then the last slide has to do with our budget calendar. So you'll see September, October is the time frame we're currently in, very early in the process here. November, December, so there's a lot of activity between now and December. In January, we'll be hitting budget presentation and publication. We'll be overviewing these at school committee meetings, and then we'll have a vote by our school committee at that point. So that's what I have to present this evening, brief, and I'll take any questions if you have them.
Any questions? Go ahead, Mary. I didn't even look at anyone else first, Mary. I went right to you.
Can you just give us, even at a ballpark level, an amount associated with the ESSER cliff? Like how much shortfall, how much of the ESSER grant's covering now, and what is the cliff that we're going to hit afterwards? And maybe remind us of what's needed remaining to fully fund full-day K. I remember a few years ago, you know, Dr. Doherty used to say, oh, full-day K is going to cost the district $1.2 million a year. And I don't know if that's still a number that's valid. Thank you.
Dr.
Thanks, Mary.
Feel free to defer to our team. He's 2 months in, so if you want to plan.
It's okay.
We're here to support you too.
I do appreciate that.
We want to keep him here for a third month, so that would be wise.
Came back for the first two, so here I am. So I believe that ESSER amount to be, so this is always the danger of me throwing out numbers, is that people anchoring around them, but I believe it was in the 300K range. So that was already, that's been accounted for going forward. Yeah, thank you very much. Mark that point. So we certainly built that into the budget going forward, so we've been keeping our eye on that number. And then, you know, as grants end and grant funds come to a close, that represents an opportunity for us to evaluate how we're going to move the district forward. So that's on the ESSER piece. On the full-day kinder, sorry.
We have our star.
Oh, yeah, please.
Full-day K.
Please, sir.
So full-day kindergarten is a question of how do we get, the 1.2 million was the right number, but it's how do we spread that out so we can absorb that over a period of time, right? We maintained the revolving account of $621,000 at the end of the year, which is what we maintained it at the previous year, so we could use that to spend down. We will be spending that down starting FY25 over a 3-year period, at which point we will get to, after that 3-year period, the revolving fund will be fully gone, and we will have fully absorbed everything in the full-day K. The second year of that will be the beginning of the free period for our students. So this year we're at 26.5, next year will be at 14.5. The year after that, which is FY26, would be free. The revolving fund would be empty at the end of FY27. And so we would then at that point have absorbed the 1.2 million over that 4 or 5 year period in $300,000 chunks essentially, which is why the 150 is coming from the town. They do 150, we do 150 to 250 depending upon where we are in the year, and we get to that absorption period by the end of FY27.
So at our end, you have a path planned out, and there's not extra money we need unless we want to speed up?
We're not asking for any more than what's already planned as part of the community parties.
Great.
Any other questions for, go ahead, Joe.
So I have a calendar question, and I recognize that the likely and entirely reasonable answer is I have no idea or I don't know. We mentioned earlier there's uncertainty about the details of some of our contractual obligations, and I'm wondering when we'll have more certainty about that, just how that fits in with all our other budget planning timeline.
So So the answer, the short answer is I don't know, and I'll give a little bit more, just so I think we have tried to engage with our bargaining units as soon as we've been able to, just to try to have as many knowns as we enter into the budget season. With that said, we do know a lot of our, looking at like local districts, some are entering into, this school year with contracts that have expired. Certainly not the situation that we want to be in, but certainly recognize it could be as soon as, sometime within the next month for some of our, bargaining units, all the way through to what would be, I would think, hopefully before sometime the end of next summer. But our goal is certainly to have everything buttoned up, if possible, within, sort of the budget season, if possible. But we recognize this complex process.
Yep.
Understood. Thanks.
Any other questions for folks on the school side? Seeing none, thanks very much.
Thanks very much. I did want to just thank both of my predecessors, so Gail Dowd and then Susan Botan, who were there, and then also wanted to thank Sharon Engstrom, who's a clear subject matter expert, has been very generous with her time and support. So I've really been impressed through the first couple of months. The district is, from what I've assessed at this stage, to be in a really good position, and I've been most impressed by the collaboration and the real sense of community that's here. So thanks to FINCOM as well as our school committee and our community members. So thank you for supporting schools.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. So we had, I think we did this a little bit out of order just because I decided I wanted to talk about it. But yeah, so I think we don't have to talk about free cash again, I don't think, right?
No.
All right, so we are now on to the presentation from the Pickleball Players Association on the citizens petition. Can't say that fast 3 times.
Can you see if we have a recreation forum? I don't know if anybody's online.
Yeah, I don't know who's on Zoom.
Is anyone?
I'm looking at it now. Ben Reed, is he on recreation? Ben Reed? I think he's on.
Okay. And who? Yeah, so we have 1, 2, 3,
Ben Reams,
4.
Carla Bracci.
We have 4.
I don't think you're first.
We did those. Yeah. But we only have 4, we don't have 4.
Rebecca Bailey, I don't know who's on the
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eileen Manning, and I am a board member on the Reading Pickleball Players Association. We have a few other board members and lots of pickleball fans here today. Thank you for giving us this time today to be able to share with you what we've been doing and what our hopes are and our request is for pickleball within Reading. We are a nonprofit organization that was founded this year to help advocate for and raise funds for permanent lighted pickleball courts in Reading. We realize that may not happen this year and are hoping to work a plan to get us to that point. Could I have the next slide, please?
Eileen, before you go to, I wasn't anticipating a question this early, but you guys are a 501c3. Is that similar, like, is that, type of an organization, are you similar to like other towns, that have, organizations like that you're, kind of a 501c3, or in like other pickleball associations in other towns set up differently?
We're a nonprofit like other organizations within our own town. I don't know specifically.
Yeah, more just on, I'm thinking about more just from a pickleball perspective, out of curiosity.
I know some towns have set up other nonprofits to raise funds. I can't tell you specifically about any towns locally to us who've done it. Okay. So part of our work this year has been doing some outreach within the community, hosting a day at the field house, and have participated in Unity Day at the high school and Friends and Family Day in the Fall Street Fair to sort of get word out there about where people can play pickleball in town and, help to understand what our community looks like and what our needs are. Next slide, please. So pickleball growth has been explosive across the nation. The number of people playing pickleball in the past 3 years has grown by 159%, according to the Sport and Fitness Industry Association, and we have certainly seen that within our own town. There's, a significant number of people that, we think there's about 400 regular players based on what we're seeing, and a significant number of casual players who are anxious to find a place to play. There's, many towns in Massachusetts who've been facing this issue, and within the past 5 years, some of our neighbors and lots of other places, such as Woburn, Wilmington, and Wakefield, have added courts. Can I have the next slide, please?
Are they dedicated courts, or are they repurposed courts?
So those 3 towns specifically have added dedicated courts. There's, a number of different approaches that towns have taken. There is a trend for dedicated courts at this point.
And are they all outdoor? I don't know.
Pickleball is a sport that you play indoors when you can't play it outdoors, so generally people are looking for outdoor courts, and that is what we're seeing. I haven't seen any towns build indoor pickleball communities, but there's certainly been some private for-profit ones built.
Thanks.
So while our goal is to help fund some permanent lighted pickleball courts in Reading, we recognize that may take us a little longer than we had hoped, and that current court constraints are limiting our residents to be able to get out there, be social, be healthy in their sport of choice. Could I have the next slide, please? As we've looked for appropriate court space, there's currently 2 places in Reading that pickleball is being played. There's Memorial Park that are dual-lined courts, tennis courts, and they are currently oversubscribed. During peak morning and evening hours, those courts, when they come available at 6 a.m., are booked within minutes.
And when you say available, sorry for asking all these questions, but when you say available, we release that, was that from rec?
The Recreation Department releases on a daily basis at 6 a.m. 2 weeks in the future, I think it is? Yes.
No one saw this, but the whole room nodded, so yeah.
You can tell the early risers that are up there trying to get that court. So it books right up. There's a lot of folks in town trying to help people get on courts that will go ahead and book a court. They will then post on another site, say, we're looking for people to play at this level, and, come play with us. It's a very social sport, and it's not a sport where just 2 people show up and use a court for an hour on their own. You usually see a much larger group, sort of taking turns playing round robin with each other. So as we're looking for a space where we can, and there's also some very basic painted on asphalt, courts at Birch Meadow. There's 4 painted lines kind of behind where one of the baseball fields is, near the kids' playground.
Yep.
As we're looking for places for courts, we require enough distance from homes that it's not too noisy for folks and that there's sufficient parking. The Recreation Department has done a great deal of work trying to figure out where we can put courts. The Reading Pickleball Players Association has looked around too. We've looked at other neighborhood tennis courts. They're pretty close to homes. And there's, certainly a concern that we want to be good neighbors and not wind up right on top of somebody else in a situation that's untenable for them. So there were planned courts in the Birch Meadow Phase 2 plan, and they were removed in late June, and there's not been a plan to recite those courts. And with that removal from the plan, we lose not only those future courts, we also lose the 4 basic courts that already exist at Birch Meadow. Okay. Next slide, please. So the only place in town that we've been able to identify for courts with available space and distance from homes is adjacent to the Burbank Ice Arena. And the Ice Arena Authority has made a preliminary offer to use a portion of their parking area for pickleball courts. This is a portion of the land in Simon's Way that is under long-term lease to the Ice Authority. So those courts, in order to be, a safe and, space that we can really play on, they'd need to have an athletic asphalt base with painted lines and some barrier fencing so that there's, a safe distance from where there's cars parked for us to be able to play. There's minimal site work needed to change the property and be able to handle this temporary solution. What is different about this than a permanent court is we're looking at minimal fencing, so just barriers to where there would be parking. There would not be permanent courts affixed. The RPPA would be looking at getting temporary nets that we would be able to move off of that space, and there would not be lighting or any significant interior fencing to separate the courts. Next slide, please. All right, this gives you an idea of where these courts would be. We have been on a bit of a road show with this presentation, talking with the select board last week, asking them about options. They would, of course, need to amend or renegotiate part of the lease in order to make this happen. We have also presented to the Simon's Way Committee in, I believe it was July, and at that time, we were looking at the potential of land swap, basically. Could we get some more parking for the rink that would replace where these courts would go? That was not something that worked out for them. They were far more supportive of a temporary option, which is why we've now taken a look at how could we do this in a temporary way that doesn't impact with future plans for the Simon's Way area. Next slide, please. You can see the entire Simon's Way property here and get the scale of where those courts would be. Next slide, please. And this is a close-up view of where the courts would be, and you can see that there would just be kind of a minimal footprint where that red line is.
And there are lights already, are there lights already?
There is one light pole already there. If you can see that one dot sort of to the left side, yep, right there.
Oh, okay.
So we would suggest leaving that there and not, disturbing anything that's there.
Would that allow you to play at night?
It may allow us to use
A couple of them?
a couple of the courts near there.
So I'm going to ask another question, then I have more, but I'll ask this one, and then I'll let other people weigh in. A couple slides ago, you mentioned Birch Meadow Phase 2. I forgot my question. So on Phase 2, what's the, and actually it's not for you, Eileen, sorry. This is more of a question for Fidel. What's the timing on Phase 2? That's the piece of it I wasn't sure. Sorry, I knew it was a question, I just didn't know it was for you.
That's okay.
Yeah, so what was the timing on that piece of it, and just out of curiosity?
Yeah, funding for Phase 2 is in the capital plan for FY25. So it's coming up.
Funding.
Funding for a borrowing is in the capital plan at the moment for FY25. So it's coming up. It is before you. It will be for you for a vote at your October 11th meeting. It is going to be in the warrant for November of for town meeting in November.
All right, so FY25, but then when does that break ground? When is that?
Yeah, construction projects are typically a 2-year project. So if it's approved in November, I would expect them to be fully done, November of 2025.
Perfect, that's all I need. That's it.
Can I follow up on the question?
Of course, yeah, please.
Fidel, can you clarify, because there seems to be maybe some dispute in the community about this. So this funding for FY25, so it does not include pickleball, right?
The current design that we are proposing to town meeting includes 2 basketball courts.
So pickleball, it's a correct statement to say that pickleball has been removed from the Birch Meadow plan?
The current design, no, just kidding. When we completed the Birch Meadow master plan, right, and this was a long process, you know, that had a lot of input from the community. The area that is off Bancroft showed 8 courts, basically that were next to the tot lot, right, to the playground. The idea at that time was that the basketball court that is there would be removed, and the pickleball court that is next to it would be removed as well. There was, at the time, some consideration, I believe, of putting basketball closer to the field house, right, at that time. When we started pursuing phase 2, right, through recreation, through our community, we heard a lot of vocal threats, even of people who said that they would be very opposed to having pickleball courts in residential neighborhoods, and some even sent, I know the recreation committee and town staff, litigation that is currently in place in other towns, right? So it was the shift from pickleball to basketball courts was very much done in the public through recreation.
That's not really my question.
It wasn't hidden, or it wasn't.
Butters, and there was no way to, in the plan, because I've never, and I apologize, I probably should have seen it, but I haven't. But like, there's no way to like redesign that so pickleball is close to the school, so it like, it's because it's a sound thing, right? Is it a sound thing?
It's a sound thing. It's a sound thing.
There's no way. There's no way to be able to redesign it so that you could still fit it in and not be sued.
Not. How do we?
You can always be sued.
Not be sued.
Well,
right?
yeah.
The
I know you're not an attorney, but
I don't play one on TV either. The answer is probably no. The Birch Meadow the Birch Meadow master plan showed basketball courts on the opposite side of the parking lot that's in the field house. But what we didn't know then is that there's a huge drain pipe, essentially, that is going in that area, and our engineering team essentially said that it wouldn't be wise to install anything on top of the pipe, because if any maintenance is required, we would essentially dig it up.
So my question, though, we didn't really get to it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm trying. I'm dancing here, Marianne. I think that's pretty obvious.
Pickleball courts were removed from Birch Meadow Phase 2, to understand why, and they're not moved to anywhere else. We have no pickleball courts planned anywhere in town. Is that a correct statement?
Birch Meadow Birch Meadow master plan.
Whatever this Birch Meadow that we're funding, are there any pickleball courts planned anywhere in town right now by the town?
I would say that the Recreation Committee has been talking about pickleball for a while, and there has been a lot of discussions about modifying existing courts, right? Doing temporary lining of existing courts, and we have heard a lot of opposition to doing that in residential neighborhoods.
Right. So I'm just trying to understand this request in the context. These are the only courts you know of being planned of in Reading right now, or that they're trying to get through. Yes?
I think I've said whatever.
Thank you.
All right, Emily, then Joe.
Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe
So this is going to hopefully answer your question. So I would like to start by saying that so for those of you who don't know me, I am Emily Sisson. I'm on FINCOM now, but I was on rec for 9 years, plus or minus, and I've been talking with a lot of you for a very long time about this. So the Birch Meadow Master Plan, we need to back up, it is a visionary document, and that is like the very that's something to keep in mind. So that's a conceptual plan. We engaged Activitas, which is a consulting company, to kind of help us build our vision based on community input and what we want, what we need. And we structured it such that we had it in doable chunks. Phase 1 is the spine, the bathrooms, the things people really wanted, accessibility, restrooms, lighting, make it a more accessible area. Phase 2 included what are our nice to haves, what are people wanting? And there were, spaces for basketball, there were spaces for pickleball, there were spaces. It's still very much a conceptual plan. And conceptual plans have a tendency to change because of infrastructure problems, Wellesley lawsuits that maybe scare people off. So, phase 1, we have this plan, and then when we were ready for phase 1 with funding, we brought in a design team, and we had, our request for proposals, all of this stuff, and then those plans kind of get solidified. So we're not at a stage, so far as I know, I've been out of it for a year and a half now, but I still follow it because I'm a lunatic. So far as I know, we're not at a stage where we have an official design or an approved design for phase 2. Is that a fair statement?
We have conceptuals, correct.
We have conceptual design only, and that at this moment, so far as I know, do not include pickleball any longer, and basketball had to be relocated because of drainage issues and, infrastructure problems. So, when it's a conceptual thing, I feel like it's a little disingenuous to say things were taken away that were never officially there. Do you know what I mean?
So they were never really there.
This is our vision for the area, just like our vision for the back of Coolidge is 2 turf softball fields. Is that where we're gonna end up in 10, 15 years?
Whatever it is, there are no pickleball courts planned anywhere right now.
So far as I know.
Thank you.
So, all right, so Joe, then Mark.
So I'm trying to understand Fidel's answer to Marianne's question about planning for pickleball, because we just said that SWEC is considering pickleball at Simon's Way.
Man, you see,
They discussed it in a meeting. Did they? And they didn't.
I don't want to get pinned into a corner here.
You want me to answer for you? Put out on fine getting pinned into a corner.
Yeah.
I will, I'll give it to him, straight without dancing.
Yeah, we put out a survey, and a pickleball was very much a top priority for Simon's Way.
SWEC has no plans yet.
Not yet.
There's no plans for anything.
Yep.
Yeah, it's sort of a different, I do want to make sure I understand, there's a distinction between SWEC is in the process of planning, like they have an RFI, they're waiting for responses, it's like another couple weeks before those come back.
Yep.
And then they'll, of course, look at that information they get in response to the request for information and work on plans. But I do want to make sure I understand they're in the process of planning, and therefore they don't have a plan, rather than they have plans not to do something. It sounds like it's the former. They are in the process of planning. So, no, technically, doesn't plan exist? No, because they're in the process of creating a plan. So, yeah, I would not expect a plan to exist before it was created. I mean, we're getting weirdly semantic here, but
Can I try to unweave what you said?
Sure.
I think your point is, yes, there are no current plans now, but we fully expect that SWEC is going to lean in the direction of pickleball? Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, I haven't been following SWEC closely. I'm trying to get a read of which way they're leaning.
Yeah. I don't know if they're at a point where they're leaning yet.
They wanted to leave all options listening.
We do have someone from SWEC here, right?
We do, but I would, can Ms. Manning get through her presentation? And I would like to speak after that. Thank you.
All right, so Mark, since we'll open it up then outside of that.
So for the November town meeting, there's going to be a warrant, an article for approving phase 2 of Birch Meadow.
That's your next slide.
That will come up in the presentation.
No, you're talking about Birch Meadow. You're asking about Birch Meadow. Yeah.
So that's November's town meeting, right?
So, some context for November town meeting. The Article 6 is a 4-part article. Town staff applied for a $500,000 grant from PARC, P-A-R-C, which is a group from the state that funds basically recreation efforts. In order to submit the grant, we had to develop basically a conceptual plan, right? This is what we're going to build. So the Article 6 is a 4-part article that is related to what would be Phase 2 in Birch Meadow.
So we're going to be looking for approval at the town meeting for Phase 2. That won't include pickleball.
The current conceptuals has 2 basketball courts.
All right.
All right.
Sorry about that.
So, to meet the pressing demand for pickleball courts in Reading and to mitigate that planned loss of the existing courts at Birch Meadow and what we believed were proposed courts that were going to be at Birch Meadow, and recognizing that there's not another place that seems to meet those requirements for, noise mitigation, and accessibility, we requested the select board pursue using part of the Burbank Ice Arena land for pickleball courts in 2024, while a future plan for the Simons Way property is developed. So what we did was take this down to a bare bones court. Next slide, please. So that, sorry, there was an updated slide for this. This was our draft warrant article. The update was we had put in a citizen's petition with language about using the ICE authority's revolving account for that $200,000. Can we have that slide back? For the 8 temporary pickleball courts. So that draft, that citizen's petition was put in and will be in the warrant, that we did get the signatures, and it was authorized today, I believe.
We sent it FinCom.
Okay, so FinCom has it? Good, so you can at least see the wording on that?
Yep, we have it.
Okay,
Yeah, it was in the packet.
okay, great. So again, on the land adjacent to the Burbank Ice Arena, we recognize that the Simons Way Exploratory Committee is looking for options there. We recognize that likely there will be pickleball courts involved in their plan. We also recognize that we are already over capacity. And as we, look at when will Simons Way be taking action on that property, it's a long way off, from what we're hearing. Now, perhaps something will come in the RFI that'll make that a little easier. This takes off the Simons Way Exploratory Committee plate the need to fit pickleball courts into what they're doing.
So these courts are intended to be temporary. If it takes that off of Simons Way Exploratory Committee's plate, and then they come up with a plan that doesn't have pickleball courts, what happens?
Or they
3-4 years down the line.
They can use that space. So if they take it off, we've got to find, if they wind up with some, huge building they're going to put there, we will be in that same crisis again and need to find a place for pickleball courts. Right now, we're trying to meet that pressing need the most economical way that we can without interfering with Simons Way's Exploratory Committee's plans.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys are a 501c3. Is that an exempt or a non-exempt organization? Is it tax exempt or non-exempt?
It's a nonprofit. It's tax exempt, correct?
It's exempt. And the reason that I
Yeah.
ask is that I'm pretty sure for tax exempt nonprofits, there is grants that you can apply from different private foundations. So have you looked at any grants that you can apply for at all or no?
We know that there is an AARP grant that if you have a site, you can apply for. I have not found other grants. If you know of some, we'd be happy to help apply for them.
The reason that I ask is also this is tied out to improving the health of senior citizens, so I'm pretty sure that there should be some grants out there that will help in that area. The other question that I had is, are you guys with members or non-members? Do you have like membership base or?
We do not, as we started the organization this year, we didn't start with growing a membership base. We started with the strategy of like, what do we do? How do we advocate? It's not something that we've ruled out, but, for now, we don't have a, dues paying membership base.
That's another way to look at it, because $200,000 is only $500 per member, and you already have 400 people that play. So $500 each, that's 200, so. Just an idea.
It's not cheap,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Just an idea.
There was still another slide. We keep losing the presentation, which did give you some cost estimates.
Yep.
These two select board members who want to talk. Karen Ambers. Karen's had a hand up for a while.
So if we could look at the next slide.
So Karen, it says Chris. Yeah, there's your slide.
So this gave some cost estimates looking at how much, doing this very basic but still, safe and playable courts would cost. This is where we're getting that $200,000 number from. We believe it'll be less. There is contingency built into this. Missing from this slide is also the roughly $16,000 that we were projecting the cost for nets, some temporary interior barriers, some benches, storage box kind of things that would be funded by the Reading Pickleball Players Association.
Gotcha. Thank you, Eileen.
All right.
You might as well stay. I know there's no questions. I'm gonna, any for the committee? I know we've asked a bunch, but then I want to. Jeffrey, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you again.
When you say temporary, how long do we expect them to last? I mean, is it one season? Is it 20 years? Is it somewhere in between? If we don't,
You mean for the fencing and those kind of things?
You said for temporary.
For the court?
What does temporary mean in this context?
So Joe, what it means is that if you need to take out that fencing, it's not a big expense, it's not a big deal. Can that surface be used for a while? Yes. It's planned to be the minimum. Joe, you can probably answer better, sort of the different layers of asphalt that you could use and that kind of stuff as to how long they expect it to last.
Basically, the asphalt is just going to have a top coat of 4 layers of acrylic painted. It lasts about 10 years with the type of use we're going to have. The idea is that we just have barrier fencing on 2 sides in a paved area. So if something comes up down the road that they want to use it for something else, it's not a big deal to take that 8 foot on one side and 4 foot on the other side of chain link fencing. And then you just have pavement on what's existing parking area. So that's why we call it temporary, because it could easily be remove the fencing and it's just an asphalt area.
Okay, but then it's $200,000 that we spent to pay somebody else's parking lot, right? So I guess that's kind of my.
Well,
fair enough. Okay.
I mean, it's an area that probably wants to be paved anyway, and that's most of the money. I think it'll probably be done for $150,000.
Cool. Go ahead, Marion.
I don't want to bring up a sore subject, but at the select board meeting, an ice arena board member stood up and offered to have the board somehow kind of pay for it. And then, then there were rumors that, oh, now the ice arena isn't going to do that. Do you have any further information? Like, instead of you guys doing it, I think it was Mr. McFadden who stood up and said, oh, the ice arena can do it with private construction and we can take it out of what we would have given the town this year. Did that go anywhere? Because I only can go by the news articles. Does anyone know? No.
All I know is that Carl McFadden is aware that we are presenting here tonight and, presenting the same information.
Okay.
It didn't appear to me at that meeting that the select board was interested in that offer, but they would have to speak to that.
Okay. Because that seemed like it wouldn't cost the town anything.
I'm gonna go to Karen first, because I've seen her hand forever. Then to Chris, and then Mark and Go ahead,
Okay,
Karen.
thank
Karen.
you, Chair.
Yep.
I appreciate that. So just, congratulations to the Reading Pickleball Association for getting your 501c3. That's terrific. Appreciate the effort. And again, this presentation, I know you guys are working hard and you're passionate. So I did have the opportunity to meet with the recreation director. She's not here tonight, but so just for context, in Reading, the Memorial Park, what used to be tennis courts, are now essentially the de facto pickleball courts for the town. There are 4 of them, and so they're available 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, probably more at the peak of the summer, but let's just round. So that's 280 hours of pickleball across 4 courts. So, I want to be clear. We have no one in the town, not the rec department, not the rec committee, no one has taken away all access to pickleball in town. And in fact, in everything but actually dedicated, we have dedicated pickleball courts. And, I understand there's huge demand. So I would, as a select board member, and we're not here to talk about this tonight, I wouldn't be opposed to taking, Memorial Park further and really just being very upfront that those are pickleball courts. Yay. But the other context is that we have seniors that have been waiting for a first floor bathroom for at least 2 decades, and the cost of that is $150,000. So again, it's context. When we're talking about capital planning, neither of these things right now are in the capital plan. So that really puts them, pretty far behind in the process unless we as a group decide to, bump up the priorities. So, that's the context. $200,000 out of the town's funding for pickleball courts, or $150,000 for a first floor bathroom for the seniors of our community. So that's just one comment. And then I would be interested in knowing, and I would say the Reading Pickleball Association is already doing a great job of getting these estimates and laying out what these costs would be. I don't see permanent paved course as a temporary solution. So might I request that you also get some estimates for taking out this installation, because we are waiting for RFIs from the SWEC process. And we may well be, if town meeting were to approve this, and we were able to renegotiate a lease with the ice arena and get this to happen, we may be taking these out like within 12 months after they're installed. So that's not insignificant. And so there's that. I would love estimates for removing this, okay? And then just to give you some context about the ice arena. The ice arena has a 30-year-old roof, which is currently leaking and has some temporary fixes in there to keep it from disrupting operations. They, in their lease, have the ability to do improvements to projects, but they have to have money to do that. So I don't know if you all know, the town, which is supposed to be receiving income from this lease only received $14,000 last year. It may be better this year. I don't know. We might know by the end of the month. That's when it's due. But I will say, there's a lot of moving parts, because if we were to open this and sort of talk to them, they do have the opportunity to have a reserve fund to do this kind of work. But I just want to be clear that they have a major project in front of them. I saw one estimate, and that was for about $325. I saw it a year ago, and what they have in reserves today is about $350. So there's not a lot of cash there. And then
Karen, I think we're going to get a little bit off topic as we're talking about like the roof of Burbank, and I know there's other people that want to.
So context to
Yep.
what we're being presented with tonight is that Burbank would be happy to build these courts. Well, they are going to be very busy building a roof. I can stop there. Fair enough.
Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it. Chris, go ahead. Chris, then Mark.
Thanks, Ed. So to touch on something that Karen just said, she said what Fidel did not, that there is no money for pickleball in the capital plan. So that's how it exists today. There is $0 being spent on pickleball in Reading, Massachusetts for the foreseeable future. Anything to do with Memorial Park and all these other ones is a non-starter once again, because it's near residential neighborhoods and all the residents want to complain about it, which is rightfully so. You wouldn't want to be listening to that every day. So the Reading Pickleball Players Association stepped back and said that they don't want to put any courts near any residential neighborhoods. So in doing so, here we are with Birch Meadow being removed out of the master plan, conceptual designs, whatever. I've seen 4 or 5 different variations. Pickleball courts are not going at Birch Meadow at all. Regardless of how Fidel wants to dance around the subject, they're not going there. The other point is that the draft warrant article is including taking the $200,000 from the Burbank Ice Arena revolving fund. That can't be used to pay for the senior center or any additional items like Karen had mentioned, because it's coming out of the Burbank Ice Arena revolving fund, which is handling with recreation, et cetera, in the town. And then lastly, I just want to reiterate for the 1,000th time, SWEC is not looking at doing work behind the Burbank Ice Arena. The Burbank Ice Arena has a lease for 20 years. You can want to put Disney World over there, and you are not getting Magic Kingdom behind the ice arena without the ice arena renegotiating the lease. It is crystal clear, black and white. There's no deviating from that. SWEC is looking at the right-hand side of Simon's Way and some stuff on the top left and as soon as you come in on the left. Zero to do with behind the Burbank Ice Arena. Burbank came before the select board and brought up the option of doing the pickleball courts behind there. That's their option first, and then it's ours, and then we can negotiate from there. Otherwise, Burbank has zero incentive to do anything else for the next 20 years. I don't know why we keep going around this issue. That's just how it is. And if we don't like it, 20 years from now, we can change the lease. Until then, it's staying. So I just hope that going forward with this, the temporary aspect that they're bringing up, they're just doing it because it's what's going to pass town meeting, et cetera, the easiest. For a couple, not a couple grand more, but 10, 20, 30 grand more or whatever we touched on last time, they can become permanent courts. And once again, it doesn't matter whatever SWEC does on the right-hand side and everything going forward, the pickleball is eliminated from the designs over there, and it's just behind Burbank. So basketball courts, soccer, whatever senior center, community center they want to do, all that, pickleball is now behind Burbank, call it a day. And to not do it permanent because it's easier isn't the right way to go about doing it. Eileen had mentioned that it's going to be difficult for the Pickleball Players Association to raise funds on temporary solutions, whereas if it was a permanent solution, they will be able to raise significant funds compared to temporary. So it's just going to handcuff them in their efforts going forward with that. So I just hope FinCom next month just approves this. Same thing with town meeting. I mean.
So, Chris, let me ask you this question, because I think I'm stuck on something that what you were just saying. So, and I might be confusing this issue, so forgive me. It may not be that you can answer it. This may be a Fidel question or somebody else. But so, first question is around these pickleball courts, and so this is a Burbank thing, and so this is, so if it's outside of SWEC, doesn't the lease have to be renegotiated or updated in order to do this?
Yes.
If the citizens petition gets accepted by town meeting, but I don't think it's, and I read it quickly, but I don't think the petition talks to that. I don't think it needs to probably, but that's a reality. Am I right in that?
Yeah, no,
It does mention it.
it does, yeah. Jackie, if you can put up the petition again, that would be great. That's why we put it up. It has mentioned too that the vote is contingent upon successful negotiation of the lease.
Okay, and so kind of a tangential question to that, and SWEC related. Does the lease have to be updated again after we do something, if we do something with SWEC? Does it have to be then amended again?
That's interesting. So the lease is between the select board and the Reading and the Burbank Ice Arena Authority, right? So those are the two signatories, right? Both parties could agree to do a side letter, for instance, right, or an amendment that includes this, right? But it's up to those parties, and if that is what the parties want to do, and they agree, then that could be the end of that. If the parties wanted to open it up and make it bigger, that's really up to both parties. I don't know if that's a question you're asking.
Well, I'm just, I guess to be more kind of blunt about it, are we doing one, and then we're gonna have to do another one when we decide what we're gonna do with Simon's Way? Because because otherwise, and maybe this is to the point, then why are these just why aren't these just permanent quotes?
It's two different things. The right-hand side of Simon's Way and some other conservation stuff on the top left, et cetera, that's what SWEC is working on. Burbank's option behind them is Burbank's for 20 years. So it doesn't matter what SWEC wants to do. Burbank would have to agree to it first. Otherwise, it's a non-starter. So the right-hand side of SWEC, we can do whatever we want to do. It doesn't impact the Burbank lease.
But isn't that part of the? But wouldn't that be some of that in scope? Like if you're looking at all that, go ahead, Mark. Isn't that like a piece of it? And then if pickleball courts are a part of this, then I guess that I'm trying to rationalize all that. And apologies if I'm making this worse.
No, I think you're spot on. So the reality, I think, is that SWEC and the town are trying to figure out what's the best opportunity for development down on Simon's Way. It started out just with the Zani property that was purchased, call it on the right-hand side. If we can go back to the picture of it, you can see what it was. And then SWEC came back and approached the select board to broaden their scope, to be able to essentially look at the entire parcel there to find out what the opportunities could be, and to issue a request for information about that, to figure out what's the best way that we can utilize that land for recreation, for other things, maybe for a senior center, maybe for who knows what, including the possibility that we would move things around, right? So we have a ball field in a certain spot and all sorts of different things. The goal is to figure out what's the best use for this, right? So the process is happening. So that's kind of piece one. As it relates to Burbank and Ice Arena, so I think that the reality is what you were saying, Ed. The reality should be, and I would think that the Ice Arena would appreciate this also, let's figure out what the best opportunity is. And if it means doing something different with the parking lot, they've already indicated a willingness to consider that. So whether it's for pickleball courts or for something else, I think that's kind of all possibilities we'll see. So one of the things I think that the Pickleball Association did, and I think what the recommendation was from SWEC, was to say, hey, we don't know what we want to do with that space completely yet. Short term, near term, maybe there is an opportunity to do something there, with the proviso that if we come up with some wonderful proposal that needs that land, we may need to talk about moving. So that, I think, is what the temporary comes from.
Okay.
I can't speak
No, I get
completely
it.
for
Okay.
SWEC, but I can speak for what the select board talked about. So I think that the select board is just had its first discussion about this. There's certainly no consensus in terms of where and what and how. But it would, no matter what, it would require a renegotiation of lease if we were to do this, even temporarily. If there were to be a big proposal that made sense for the entire area, that would be a renegotiation as well, to have that discussion to see what's going on. But I think one of the questions that came up is there a shortcut and cut costs and things like that. Don't have full legal opinion, but my anticipation would be it's town land, and we would want to comply with all appropriate regulations in
Yeah, you
taking
just
care
can't
of that.
sub that out on town land, can you?
I'm sorry,
You
can't?
just can't sub that out and say, oh, well, you can build on town land, but you can do it cheaper.
I will leave that to legal minds,
Yeah,
but
that doesn't sound right.
doesn't smell so
Yeah,
good
it
to
doesn't
me.
sound right.
I think y'all should stop
Anyway,
talking.
so I think the notion of, hey, there's a shortcut, get it done.
I'm not town council. I pretend to be, though.
Right. So we can let them go through that. So I think, what's going on, and one of the reasons why I think some members of the board suggested a citizens petition is because a lot of the work that typically we would do in the capital plan and going through all these activities and sharing it and getting the different committees to chime in hasn't yet happened, right? Because it wasn't on the capital plan. It's kind of, this part of it is seeming to come up quickly. So in terms of kind of getting it through our system and going and seeing all the committees and doing all these things, it'd be pretty difficult to do that for November town meeting. So the notion was perhaps a citizens petition would at least get it up onto the docket, get a discussion going about it to see what are the possibilities and how could we work through it, see what's possible. One of the things that then comes through is saying, okay, $200,000, which is what these estimates look like, is that something that town meeting should or would approve, and/or are there ways to get private funds, whether it's grants or fundraising or all sorts of other activities, to see what that might look like, to do it as quote-unquote temporary, which may have a longer life, it's not a year or two. And if it does turn out that that's the right location and it's not going to be used for other things, as I understand it, there's the possibility of more permanent kinds of things being added to it at that point. So the hope was that this could be the best of all worlds.
Okay, that's helpful. Go ahead, Angela, sorry, yeah, I know, so, thank you.
Thank you. Angela Binda, I am a town meeting member. I'm the vice chair of the Recreation Committee, and I am the Recreation Committee representative to SWAC. The Pickleball Association appeared before SWAC on July 24th. I urge you to watch that meeting. It was a different presentation. This is a different presentation that we got. They've been working on it. They stated that the Ice Arena Authority approached them to put in seasonal courts. That was what was proposed by the rink, seasonal courts, so they wouldn't be permanent, and when they needed the parking lot, they would get the parking lot back in the winter. RPPA said they wanted something more permanent, and when they came to us, there was a need to replace the parking, so we would need to find parking somewhere else. The Recreation Committee and the SWAC have stated that Simon's Way is a good place for pickleball courts for all of those reasons that you've heard neighborhood complaints. So we really envision pickleball courts over at Simon's Way. And I think that it also needs to be noted that one of the reasons why I think it was taken out because of the noise, but also because of the grant, and it was removed to make sure that we got the grant, because if there was any opposition to it, that would be a problem. And also, there have been towns that have built, I don't know, a couple $1 million. I think Falmouth and Wellesley have built large complexes, and they can't use them because of the noise. So Recreation Committee and SWAC have stated that Simon's Way is a good place for pickleball. It was stated at the Select Board meeting the other night that this is the best place. It's been talked to death. I want to state that that hasn't been decided where they would go. One of the drawings that we have received does show pickleball courts in a different area. At the end of the presentation, there were questions and comments from the board, and there was general support for pickleball courts, but there was no approval of this plan. We have an RFI out that I believe includes this parcel. We can go back and look at it. I think the committee's under the impression that we could get a proposal back from the RFI that includes that land. And yes, it would require negotiation with the Burbank, but I'm under the impression, and I think that other members are too, and I want to read, I went back and watched it, the meeting, and I have some comments that I think are important to hear. Nancy Toomey stated that that parcel of land is the best parcel. We want to make sure that the town is served well. Chuck Robinson stated that a permanent solution to pickleball takes the wind out of the RFI. Heather Klisch stated, we would like to put this into the mix with other permanent solutions rather than advancing it independently at this time. I'm the Recreation Committee representative to SWEC. The two things that I asked for to be included in some way, but you don't want to constrict what might come back. But the two things I asked for were pickleball courts. They're a priority. A multi-use lighted field for the Recreation Committee is also a priority. There are other town needs with regards to sports and general recreation. But I did ask for those to be included in the RFI. SWEC is expected to make recommendations to the Select Board by December. Mr. McHugh stated, so you're not opposed to this, as I understand it. And Heather Klisch stated, I think you've misunderstood me. I don't want to go forward with anything that is semi-permanent and piecemeal. She asked if our PPA is asking us to recommend this ahead of other recommendations. Ms. Manning stated we are, and Heather stated, but it's only 4 months. It's December. And Mr. McHugh said that could be workable. We're not looking for an immediate decision. And Heather commented, we need to see what the committee is recommending and how this fits into it. That is my personal opinion, too. The committee needs to see how pickleball fits into it. Like I said, we did get one picture, or one drawing from the architect that showed pickleball in another place. Is it possible that it could end up there? It's possible, but we do have RFIs out. As my husband likes to say, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. So I hope that you don't recommend this. At this time, I hope that you allow SWEC to do its job, to consider all of the proposals. We have other groups that are asking to be considered for this way too. I hope that you allow the RFI to play out and SWEC to make the best recommendations to the Select Board in the best interest of the town. The Select Board formed this ad hoc committee to determine the best possible uses for this property, and SWEC should do its job and complete its work and make recommendations, and I'm pretty sure pickleball will be included in it somewhere, but we really do need to consider all of the options, wait for the proposals from the RFI to come in. And I do want clarification because from the town manager about how the RFI was written, because I was under, if you go back and you see the blue, I was under the assumption that that is part of possibly being buildable. Can you go back on the presentation? There was a piece of land. Can we go back and see?
I mean, this slide.
Yeah, it's that slide. I mean, I don't have access to get to it.
Okay.
Oh, who has? So it was my assumption that the blue area and the purple area is part of the possibility. I mean, at the SWEC meetings, Nancy Toomey was talking about that's the best piece of land, and we have to, there could be a building that goes there, there could be a multi-use complex. We're also thinking that, we don't know what's going to happen with a senior center. So these are all possibilities that we're considering. And so it's not that it's not that it's been taken out, that land has been taken out. I don't believe it has. I believe that the RFIs will come back. I believe that all of that is possible. And, you know, if we're negotiating with Burbank again, you know, there are possibilities. If they're willing to negotiate, they might be willing to negotiate in other ways. And we do have to consider the replacement of those parking spots, because that, you know, I don't know that that has been considered. I heard that at the select board meeting that Mr. McFadden might have said that he has made a deal with St. Athanasius to put the parking over there. Well, you know, we're still losing parking spots, so thank you. I'm not in favor of going forward with this at the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Well, I'm just gonna, I think Carlos had his hand up for a while.
Can I address her?
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead. Eileen, you go first. Then Carlo, I do see you. You're seeing.
All right, as for the parking places that these pickleball courts would take, what has been explained to us by the ICE Authority folks is that they don't need most of their parking lot most nights, that it's maybe 10 nights a year in the winter that they need that much parking, that they already have a relationship with St. Athanasius where they allow parking. It is roughly, I think it was 50, 55 parking places that this replaces, and that it would not be an issue to have those additional.
It'd actually be under 50.
Okay, to have those additional cars parking at, say, the Athanasius those 10 days a year, and that they already hire a detail cop to handle the safety issues there. As far as the comments that Ms. Binda was quoting from the SWEC meeting, it was a different proposal because we've been listening along the way and trying to make sure that we understood where the concerns were within our proposals, and, you know, did change it from a more permanent nature. That was what we were looking for. The original, you know, temporary idea that, you know, the folks that know a lot about hockey offered for pickleball didn't exactly meet pickleball needs. So, and they fully understood that as we talked to them and said, all right, I get it, I'm on board that, you know, we can't park on your courts during the winter. I mean, we wouldn't want them parking on the tennis courts or the basketball courts, right? So, you know, that's where the presentation and the idea has evolved to, you know, can we find a workable solution that enables SWEC to still carry out its duty? And, you know, if they determine that that space needs to be used, you know, I will be a little sad, but, you know.
That's the other thing too, and I guess that this isn't like a, you're not going in with kind of false pretenses that this, that could happen. You know,
No, we recognize that could happen.
Yeah.
You know, and that is why we've tried to minimize the cost. You know, I find it extremely unlikely that we'd reach that point within a year, as Ms. Herrick indicated. You know, I think the reality is if we do it that quickly, we wouldn't have the courts built yet. And that, you know, we wouldn't do it if we really, you know, came from that RFI that was blockbuster and was going to be perfect. Well, we're going to know that before we'd have the courts built.
Go ahead, Carlo.
Thank you, Ed. I don't want to repeat a lot of comments that were made, but Mark was very accurate in a lot of his comments. Chris was very accurate in a lot of his comments as far as it is Burbank's lease. And I think everybody knows who I am, sorry. Carlo Bacci, Select Board, and Chair of the SWEC Committee. So, yes, the RFI has been submitted. We're waiting. We extended it a few more weeks, and Angela is correct. We did include the land in blue as potential. Also means that, of course, Burbank would have to agree to anything going on their property. 20 years, we can't do a thing unless it's amended. So the Ice Arena Board seems to be willing to work with the RPPA, who has done a lot of work and pivoted since that meeting over the summer. They've been working very hard to find a solution since it was taken out of the Birch Meadow Master Plan. So I commend them for all their efforts. Yes, we have a lot of things going on in town and a lot of priorities, but this should be one of them because there's so many great aspects physically, socially, and mentally for this sport. So long story short, Burbank has a lease for 20 years. We're waiting for an RFI, and this presentation is great. I would love to see permanent courts, of course, over there. This seems to be the ideal spot long-term, and there's no reason these temporary / interim courts couldn't be made permanent and not be part of the Simon's Way project. But until an RFI is completed and flushed out, we denied them in the summer. We have no intention, the SWEC committee has no intention of saying yes to a dog park in that area on any land that's under our purview right now. So I just want to commend everybody. A lot of the comments, most of the comments were accurate, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but I'm glad they filed a citizen's petition. There is a process asking for money, of course, and I think this is a good start for them. And we desperately need dedicated pickleball courts in town. And if we have them with lights, these could be used similar to the tennis courts at Bancroft a good 9-10 months out of the year. Pickleball players are crazy. They play below freezing. I'm not one of those people, but as long as there's not snow on the ground, you'll see pickleball players out there if the nets are up and they're allowed to use the courts. So as far as SWEC is concerned, I don't speak for all the members, but Angela did read a lot of those comments, and those are accurate from other members. And we're just waiting for the RFI, and glad that Burbank hopefully will be willing to work with us on amending the lease for this project or for a bigger project. Nelson Burbank, per Carl McFadden, was all about recreation. And if this continues on this path, this will be recreation focused, indoors and possibly outdoors. So we don't have much further to go as far as getting the results from the RFI, or respondents, I should say. And then we'll just have to take a look at it and have a meeting and go forward. But thank you. And this is a very good presentation, even though I already saw it. And I look forward to the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. So just a quick question for you, Carlo. And I don't know order of, since the, and it sounds like most, you and now Angela have seen this updated presentation. Is there a need or a desire for this presentation to be shown back to SWEC and the rest of the membership there? Or does that need to happen after these RFIs come back, or that process?
I'm speaking for myself here. I think that most of us are well aware of this, but it was not presented officially to us. It was presented to a recreation committee and the select board, and I believe most of the members of the Simon's Way Exploratory Committee are aware of this. So I don't think it's needed at this time. We have at least one meeting, if not 2 meetings before town meeting. So if it's warranted, we'll have them before us. But I think all 7 of us are well aware of this, and I fully support as much as we can do. But that's just me. So again, it hasn't been officially presented. The other presentation was a whole different scenario. And this one's a totally different scenario, which I think could be done if things fall into place.
Gotcha. Thanks, Carl.
Just to clarify, we have not formally presented to the Recreation Committee. We did have some informal discussions with them when a different pickleball item was on their agenda.
Gotcha.
Sorry, correct. Sorry, thanks.
My question is not about process, so if any of the other hands are about SWEC process, they should go first, because that's following on Carla's comment.
Mr. Bocci's incorrect. I have spoken with 2 other members. I haven't spoken with more than that because I don't want to violate open meeting law. But the 2 members that I have spoken with have not seen this presentation.
Good. All right, so go ahead, Joe, and then we got to figure out the hands in the room, but yeah.
Okay, so this is, I'm trying to limit myself to, is it a SWEC process-related question?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay, I'll yield the floor for that one and then come back.
You could probably just ask your question and maybe want to address all of it.
Trying to be nice, Ed.
Well, yeah, please come up to the mic.
It's actually a slight subject change.
So many things to respond to. Karen Janowski, I'm a town meeting member. I'm on the Council on Aging. I am also the Council on Aging rep on SWEC. And so Carlo, you weren't speaking for me. We did see a different presentation in the summer. Those comments were referenced that particular presentation. And I think this update, I was hoping to have this updated presentation presented to us at SWEC. That's me. There were a couple other points I wanted to make. Karen Herrick mentioned about, she wanted to pit the seniors against each other, essentially, when she talked about the bathroom at the senior center. And I think it's important to recognize that there are many of us who are 60 plus. How many of us in the room? Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
You guys keep your hands.
Pickleball,
See 'em.
I'm one of them. Pickleball is intergenerational. It's especially, so, I mean, look at the people in the room who are 60 plus. This is an activity for all ages, but it is intergenerational, and it is something that many of us who are in the 60 plus community are participating in. And so I don't want to lose that point, too. It's such an important one. The other thing is that another point that Karen made was that the pickleball courts at the Memorial Park are dedicated. They are not dedicated pickleball courts. They're tennis courts. Everyone gets confused by the lines because there's tennis lines and pickleball lines. So I want to make it clear that they are not dedicated courts.
Point of information, Ms. Janowski or Mr. Chair, I did not say that. Thank you.
Yeah, let's keep going. That's okay. We're good.
Thank you. I'm not losing my mind, right? So I just, I would like to see this, Carlo, maybe, this would be good for us to hear again on SWEC. I have not discussed it with any other SWEC members, but because it is a different presentation, and I would like SWEC to have a say on this. But the other thing, too, is we are waiting for RFIs, and we also are waiting for the sustainability, the feasibility study, which, again, is going to be another 6 months. So there's so many moving parts, and we know nothing is going to happen quickly, so something like this, where what we're talking about is going to happen down the road, wouldn't it be great if we, I mean, I'm amazed how many of us are 60 plus. We want to be heard as well. So, thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
To add to Ms. Janowski's point about the not dedicated to pickleball, they do, during the spring, use those courts for tennis lessons, for youth tennis lessons, which takes a significant chunk of time away that they are not available for pickleball.
Go, Joe.
I don't know, I'm curious about maintenance. I want to ask this question while the pickleball folks are here, because I'm guessing the answer is probably y'all are going to take care of it. But what is the proposed plan for any kind of maintenance of these courts? It's keeping them clean, or anything else that needs to be done after they are built? I mean, because they're temporary, but we've also established that temporary is probably more than 12 months.
Yes,
they won't be, the new paint, the new car smell will come off at some point.
Yes, though the maintenance costs are, really quite low for taking care of it. Things like the nets needing, work or things like that, we would definitely take care of as the RPPA.
Okay. wanted to make sure I understood that part.
We sweep the courts ourselves every month.
All right.
So can I ask a quick
Go ahead, Andrew, yeah, go
So
ahead.
you can play pickleball in a tennis court? Or no?
Yes.
So, yes, the courts at Memorial Park currently have lines for both. So a pickleball court will generally fit on half of a tennis court. So on one tennis court, there's a set of lines on each side of the net, and then a smaller pickleball net that's temporary, that's taken out and used to play there.
So most of the tennis courts in Reading are already occupied, that's why you guys cannot find a place.
So there's tennis courts at Bancroft that are absolutely just for tennis. You know, they're the ones the high school uses, and, you know, they're the premier courts in town. There are a number of neighborhood courts as well in varying states of ability to actually play on them, and many of them are very close to houses, and we don't have permission to play on any of those courts other than the ones at Memorial Park.
So Carl, there was a few other folks that raised hands, so, you still want to, yeah, okay, yeah, come on up. Yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, just order of operations, Carl, then,
I'm Mary Ann Devlin, and I'm on the board with Eileen and a few other folks who are here. I just wanted to mention that, I mean, obviously, there's a very pressing need for this. That's why we're up here asking you for temporary courts. If I had my vote, it'd be permanent courts. But frankly, I guess I don't understand the SWEC RFI that's out there. I know that they're trying to do a public-private partnership, and I guess I'm curious, this is a question more than a statement, is realistically what SWEC sees as the timeline for, you know, completion of the development there. I mean, to me, this is a 5-year, maybe 10-year out project to develop that whole area. And that's why we're here asking today for temporary courts, because we don't want to wait 5 years. We're 60 plus.
don't do that. Don't do that. Don't pull on our heartstrings like that. Come on.
We don't want to wait 5 years for something to materialize here in Reading. Reading's better than that. We should serve our senior community and our intergenerational community, and we should do it now, not wait 5 years from now. And that's all. And so I'm curious if someone could just answer realistically what the timeline is to develop that area. And it may be developed in phases, which means pickleball may not even be in the first phase. So that's why we're here asking for temporary courts, and if anyone wants to speak to that. Can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, SWEC has a charge that is to deliver back to the select board possibilities for development at the Simons Way area based upon criteria that we developed and based upon things that we put high, serving the most population, costs. There's a list of criteria that we used. And we're to deliver to the select board several options. Now, one of the things that we did was to put an RFI out to see if somebody had an idea for development, because in the survey that we did, there were people who, in the survey that we did, things that came out really high were recreation. Outdoor recreation was first, indoor recreation was second, and, you know, it went down. So we've developed the idea that recreation will go there. And we're not looking to build it out and build a huge multi-story building. What we're trying to do is come up with a number of plans that we can then present to the select board. One of the plans might be build pickleball in this spot, or build pickleball over here and build a dog park there. Dog park actually isn't off the table yet unless they're supposed to appear before us. So that is what it is. So if you say, the plan is to build a SWEC has this idea of building something huge. That's not what our charge was at all. Our charge was to gauge what the community's wants and needs are, and to present possibilities for the select board. And we're supposed to do that by December. And that is what we're supposed to do. And again, it is not to develop it. It is to come up with suggestions for the select board based upon town needs. And one of them could be pickleball courts.
Good, John.
So, I don't know if this is a SWEC question or a select board question or a vanilla question, but if this passes town meeting in November, and SWEC comes back in December and says, we have this great plan, and it's got pickleball courts, but a different part of the property, somewhere else. Can this money be used for those other permanent pickleball courts somewhere else, or are we tied to it them being in this spot?
I have no idea.
Maybe
That's a, that- yeah, that, I don't, yeah, that might, that's a,
Yeah, that sounds like a town council question. I would say that it probably depends on the spirit of the presentation, right? The article calls for funding in that property, right? If it's on, it says, I forget what.
Land adjacent to Burbank Ice Arena.
Adjacent, right? Again, I'm not a lawyer, yeah, it's adjacent, right? Yeah. So I think again, yeah, it probably depends on the spirit. I would imagine that I've heard actually that town meeting, it depends on the presentation probably and how it's presented to town meeting. I would imagine that you would want the spirit, right, to be consistent with the vote.
Okay.
Yep. Good question, Joe.
Yes.
Anybody else on FinCom have a question? Emily, go ahead.
There's so many things to say. First of all, you guys are champions, hanging in to almost 10 o'clock. Thank you. Mike and I started talking about Reading Pickleball Association, 2015. We've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm really excited that you guys are moving forward with the board and getting the support and organizing in the way that you need to. I think it's really great. My impression from this presentation is that this has been a moving plan for the last several months. You're learning, you're getting feedback, you're incorporating feedback, but I've heard, what I'm hearing is this iteration hasn't gone to rec, hasn't gone to probably town engineering. We haven't talked to legal about the implications of the lease changing and all of that. So just from, it feels like I understand there's a need. I know you guys are wicked into this, and that's awesome. And I know that you want the space. I hesitate to be let's move forward right now. And I'm hesitant to recommend to town meeting for this money without all of those other pieces on board. I've sat through a lot of capital project planning processes. And I'm a stickler for doing things the right way and getting buy-in from all of the right players. I'd love to see you guys keep hitting all the targets and hitting all the boards as appropriate. I don't know how swiftly you can do that before our November town meeting. That's 6-7 weeks away. So I feel like I want to encourage you, keep fighting the good fight. My personal leaning at this moment is I wouldn't want to recommend for money for a plan that hasn't gone through all of the channels quite yet. I know it's frustratingly slow, but that's just where I sit. Thank you guys.
All right. I hate to do this to the room. I'm inclined to move on, just because I want to go to bed sometime tonight.
Could I make just
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead. You may be the one that closes this out.
See if you have a motion to adjourn the select board at this time. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chris. So we'll go to a roll call vote. Carlo, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Will you vote to adjourn?
I agree to adjourn.
Yeah. Karen?
Yes.
Chris?
Yeah.
Mark, yes. Select board adjourned. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you for your time.
Eileen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Oh, Carly, actually, yeah, Carl, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can talk. Sorry, Carla.
Sorry, thank you.
I thought you left.
I actually, during this meeting, was booking my pickleball time for tomorrow. So,
I thought it was 2 weeks out. You get a little bait and switch. Not impressed.
no, but I had to book it at noon because that's when the courts aren't utilized a lot. So I rearranged my workday around it. I've heard, which is disheartening for me, many roadblocks being thrown up by boards in our town. And that's disheartening for me, because when we have groups of people who come out here with such passion, we have to listen. I hear that we're not following protocol. And for our school committee last year, when we came up here to the ARPA committee to ask for $2.2 million for our schools, literacy programs, we were grateful that you guys listened to us and broke protocol for our children. I'm going to ask that people pay attention and put pickleball in front of the line for Simon's Way temporarily. I would not want to see these courts permanent at this moment, because I do want to preserve SWEC and preserve what goes on in that area to better suit the needs of the town. Excuse me. So I would just encourage that to happen. I think that even if this is a one-year temporary solution, it is worth it. It is worth the money, just because of the amount of people who are interested. I know so many people who want to get involved with pickleball but don't, because they just don't even know how to get started. So that's my
Thanks, Carl.
That's my thing.
Any other comments?
That's a good point of information.
Yes.
Maybe Sharon can answer this, I'm not sure. Is the use of this account that's part of this article actually a capital plan use, or is it a separate account that is not part of the capital plan, and therefore shouldn't be part of the conversation of capital planning versus use of a recreation fund?
It should be in the capital plan, but I would highlight it as funding source outside of the operating budget, but it should be in the capital plan.
Okay.
And the funding source, the ice arena, I think can be used, I'd have to look, but I think it could be used for anything, because we've used it to support the operating budget in the past. So it could be for capital, I'm not sure, I'd have to double check.
I'd like to make a comment.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Just a quick one, is that 20 years ago, we didn't have lacrosse. 20 years before that, we didn't have soccer. Now, you have a sport which the coaches at the high school, tennis coaches, are already talking about. Within 5 years, there will be a pickleball league in this, among the towns here. Yeah, we're all gonna be looking for courts at that time, for sure. And here we have an opportunity to take, the Council on Aging is very, very supportive of not just bingo in this town, right? That's my point. Thank you. Thank you. No, that's all I have.
So, thank you, folks, everyone. It was very educational. I learned quite a bit. I thought I knew a lot, and I didn't. But thank you so much for that. Thanks, Eileen, for going through the presentation. Appreciate it. We are going to let you guys leave, and we're going to move on and finish up the agenda that we have.
Unless you guys are really interested.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you guys want to talk more numbers. It's riveting.
Stop by some money.
Got it. All right, so let's, we'll give this a minute for the room to move out, and then we can wrap through the rest of this.
They need to change the lease to do it, that's yes. They just signed one of these, and now you have to read it. That's a little bit more, that's a hard, not that it's hard, but.
All right, so let's bang on so we can get out of here relatively soon. All right, so next item on the agenda was to talk about future meetings and agendas. All right, so future meetings that we have, so we do have a meeting on the 11th. That meeting on the 11th is, and I think agenda-wise was to go over, and this is, and basically, if I get this right, Fidel and Sharon, recommendations and guidance for FY25 budget. That is the free cash.
Yeah, we would really appreciate a vote on that in that meeting, because it's really hard to build our budget otherwise, right? I mean,
Yeah, but I'm getting back to the point that I got a little grief earlier because I said it was going to be on the 11th, and I got pushed back that it was going to be at the forum. I was right, and none of these people get to hear it. No, that's good. All right, so no, that's fine. So we're doing that piece of it. That's on the agenda. I mean, but in fairness, if we have a healthy debate about it and we can still push it, and you can wait 2 weeks.
It's hard. It's, that budget is.
It's a barn burner.
Making the sausage is hard.
Making the sausage is hard.
Plus, it will help in negotiations to know what kind of money we're working with.
Can I ask a dumb question? I had an email from Jackie that was, it was the 11th or the 18th, confirmed 11th, right?
Confirmed 11th.
Okay, great.
Confirmed
It's the
11th.
same day as the zoning workshop?
Yes, that's right.
It's a nice issue.
And then the only other, and then on the 11th, that's why we're doing the 11th earlier, is so we could vote on the articles.
That's right.
So that you can get to print.
So we can get to print, exactly. Yeah,
This is the adjustments we make for the town.
Thank you. I much appreciated. We're trying to save money. I'll say
Give
that.
us a free dinner.
We need to have the warrants printed 2 weeks before town meeting. So it's 2 weeks, and
Yeah, thank you.
giving the printer an extra week gets us a lot of savings on the warrant books.
Awesome, thanks. And then I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna go through all the meeting timelines, but just on the financial forum, the second financial forum, and I don't think we've sent this out to the rest of the committee yet, and maybe just Joe and I have had this. But just so, and we'll get this out to everybody, but just as a high level, what we have set up for the 25th is that the Economic Development Director, the big highlights, Senator Lewis is gonna be here. He'll have remarks. We're also gonna talk Community Planning Director about MBTA communities. Did we have one other topic that we were gonna discuss, or are those the two main ones?
Just MBTA communities.
You asked. You asked about CPA.
Yeah, and CPA too. I thought that might be something else that's on there. Okay, so yeah, Community Preservation Act?
Yep.
Oh, man, it's not bad. All right, and we'll get that out for everybody so that they can see that, and they can have that in their agendas for the 25th. All right, so that's what we have there. Any questions about any of these other meetings that are on the schedule or the next two? All right, lightning round. All right, so we have to approve minutes from the August 23rd. Any questions on the agenda from the 23rd?
Motion to approve minutes from August 23rd, 2023, meeting as presented.
Second. Yes, and you guys are all here. Let's do this. Hands. All those in favor?
Can we vote on?
Oh, you can definitely vote.
Well, they abstain, they should abstain.
Because we were not present.
You can abstain.
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Yeah.
Gosh. 7-0 to 2.
It's still not a roll call vote.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Joe. I'll take the win. I'll take the win.
Exactly.
All right. Anything else from anybody? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Folks, thanks for that barn burner. Appreciate it. You're adjourned.